can joke about me, say whatever you want to say about me, whatever. He's a mushroom. He's this. He's that. 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 Don't talk about war because you don't know how is it.
Right. That's a crazy thing to say.
Don't say that.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of it. Just out of nowhere, he said that.
He said that on Twitter.
Oh wow.
He said that on Twitter. Maybe he was too high, too drunk. I don't know.
He was talking shit. You know, I mean, it gets people to pay attention. He's really good at getting people to pay attention. You know?
Yeah, he is.
He's really good at that. I mean, he could be the next Conor McGregor star, like that kind of a star where the whole
He
world
has
is watching.
that weird personality.
Yes.
Yeah, he has that.
Well, he's very disarming because people, they see. I talked about this in the last pay-per-view. I said it's a very sneaky trick because guys like you look at you, the way you carry yourself, the way you, that's a fighter. Like you look at that guy's a dangerous motherfucker. But when you see Patty, he's dancing like this, his hair is flopping around like he's in the Beatles. You know, he's like, he seems silly, but then he fucks people up. And so I think people.
Yeah, but
get
he
confused.
fucks people up like Michael Chandler.
Right.
But when he faced a real fight, who did he face?
Well, he hasn't faced anyone that good yet,
Like,
but he fucked up Michael Chandler
It
better
doesn't matter.
than Charles Oliveira did.
If that and Charles Oliveira, even this is what I was telling you before. Like when you've got 10 losses in your record, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 10.
Yeah.
Like when you're walking with a guy that has 10 losses, the level of confidence is completely different. It's completely different than when you walk in with a guy that is undefeated.
Right.
He's a dangerous guy in the striking, in the ground game, everywhere you look at him. He's a dangerous guy. He never faced a lose. That's a different mentality. You gotta have to kill him to give up. He's not gonna even give up. You gotta have to kill him. In the case of Charles, if he finds some adversity, he's gonna go to the ground. He's gonna sit and he's gonna be waiting like till you end up the fight. This is what I think. This is what I feel. This is what I see.
That was certainly the case early in his career. I think things changed with him when he had a child. Then he went on that run and became a champion. And like when he beat Justin Gaethje, when he beat all those guys, he was pretty elite. He was really fucking good. When he beat Chandler, when Chandler beat him up in that first round, he came back in the second round and fucked him up.
Who?
Chandler. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I get it.
Conor's been tested 11 times last year, 5 the year before, and none this year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He was tested this year? No.
None this year.
None this year.
That's what I'm saying.
11 times last year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's in the testing pool thing. I don't know. You know, I've heard no plans. You know, the UFC would tell me. I would say, what's going on with Conor? And I don't even bring it up anymore.
I think with him it's gonna happen like instantly. If something happens,
Well, that's crazy. I mean, if he's going to prepare, he needs like a real long camp to really get his body back to fighting shape, like real fighting shape. And he's got to remember, you know, what happened when he came back from boxing and then fought Dustin Poirier.
it
He
depends
wasn't
who he's gonna
properly
face.
prepared.
Because if you put him against me, he needs to die and be burned again.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. If you, when you think about like your division when you were the champion at 145, would he have been the fight that you would have wanted if he was in his prime at 45? Would that be the number one fight that you would have wanted at 145? For sure. Yeah, for sure. My God, for sure.
He was a dangerous guy in 145.
He was so big.
He was big, dangerous.
Yeah.
He had that
Smart.
knockout power, smart. Yeah.
Yeah. One shot knockout power. Yeah.
He had that.
Yeah, but when he would make 145, I remember that was back when the weigh-ins were literally right there. You weigh a guy in, and then they cheer in front of the crowd. Now the weigh-ins are early, and it's a ceremonial weigh-in. So when Conor would weigh in, he would look like death. See if you can find the video of the weigh-ins with Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo. He looks like he was on a boat in the middle of the ocean for 6 months. Like, look at him. Look at his face. Look at his face. Look at that one right there with Mike Goldberg. Click that one with Mike Goldberg. Yeah, click on that. My God. Look how fucking skinny he looks. Look at his face. His cheekbones. He looks like he just got out of like some Russian prison. Like, you know what I mean? Bro, that one on the right is
He looks
insane. It's
fucked
fucking insane.
with muscles.
That's insane. I wonder how much weight he lost.
I think he walks around 185.
So he lost 40 pounds before he fought? That's crazy.
He fought also at the World Weight, right?
Yes, he fought, he fought Donald Cerrone, who was really not a welterweight either. He was a 155-pounder. You know, but he wanted to fight welterweight when he came back. Like, when they were talking about Chandler, he said he wanted to fight at middleweight. And Chandler was like, okay. Like, but, you know, part of me wonders, like, whether he was ever really going to come back, you know? It's, you know what I mean?
I really think that at some point he's gonna come back, because I don't think that he wants to leave the sport with a defeat.
Right.
This what I don't think. I think that he's gonna come back, try to get a win, and then retire and be active.
Well, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see him one time. It'd be good for him to actually go to a real camp and stop arguing. You know,
It'll be good for him, for his family, for everyone.
for everyone.
But at some point he's gonna stop.
He's got a lot of legal problems too. You know, there's a lot going on with him in Ireland.
But he's running for the president.
Well, they're talking about prosecuting him for old tweets too.
Yeah?
Ireland is going crazy with their woke shit, with the restrictions and censorship, the same way the UK is. It's really scary stuff. But they're prosecuting people for tweets.
That's crazy.
Yeah, England arrested like 4,000 people last year for posting things on social media.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's
what
insane.
did they say?
You don't even have to say anything crazy. You know, you could just say, I don't want any more immigrants in my country, and they'll fucking prosecute you. It's really crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
That's not a freedom.
no, it's not
That's
at
not
all.
free space.
It's totalitarian government, and it's scary because it's they're using it to silence people's opinions. And
Crazy.
see if you can find what's going on with Conor, because there was something about Conor McGregor possibly being prosecuted for social media posts from, I believe it was 2023. Some recent post that he had made where they were going to bring him back up and prosecute him for it.
He had also like the case with the rabbits.
Yeah, and I think because he wants to run for president, of course, then they're going to use the law to try to stop him. Because look, he's very popular in Ireland, and he might win. You know, I mean, if these people think that their country's being invaded by
I
migrants,
asked to some people from Ireland, like, what are the odds that Conor becomes the president? They told me, like, probably zero.
Conor McGregor will not face charges over social media posts made before and during the Dublin riots. Yeah, you know what? They said that about Trump too. That Trump wasn't going to win either. They said
Yeah?
Trump wasn't. Yeah, all the fucking newspapers, everything was saying the chances are none.
No, but I asked to the people. I didn't ask. I didn't read the
Depends on who you're talking to,
Yeah.
though. You know, it really depends
To
on
very
how he
close
conducts
people
himself.
to him.
Oh,
To him.
okay. Feel like no way. But he should be fighting. And he should be fighting while he can, because you don't want to be 49 years old sitting back thinking, if you could have just one more, could have got it together, if I just stopped partying.
I really think that he's gonna come back at some point, but we'll see.
There's also the problem with that shin. You know, when a shin snaps like that, that's it. Nobody really comes back from that and
He's
fights
back.
in
He's
the
back.
way.
He's back. His toe is back. His chin is back. His body's back. With that much parties and drugs and all that, you gotta have to pay that price at some point.
Yeah.
You are paying the price with your health,
Yeah.
which is the dumbest thing you can do in your entire life.
It is.
Yeah,
It's a dumb
it
thing,
is.
especially for an athlete.
Exactly. He also suffered a lot with the weight cuts. That's a big damage for your body.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
also one of the reasons why I changed the weight class, because I realized that my health is the most important thing in my life. You can have everything in this life, but if you are not healthy, you don't have anything.
Yeah, you know, when you're cutting that much water out of your body, you're essentially getting to death's door. You're getting to death's door 24 hours before you fight. Like you at a world championship level, just crazy.
You sometimes feel that you will gonna die. I wasn't able to sleep in 48 hours at all because I was so dehydrated. My body was so like skinny. I was dreaming with water, with food, with everything. My social media and reels, everything was about the food. Everything was about food. At that moment, you don't give a fuck about anything material, about anything.
So tell me when you start. So if you were gonna make 145 on Saturday, what is your weight cut like, or on Friday? What is your weight cut like for the week? When does it start? And what do you weigh before it starts?
So, okay, basically I started weight cut since the first day I started the training camp, which is 12 weeks.
Real.
Yeah, I'm on like very strict diet and I have only one cheat meal a week. On Saturday, on Wednesday, whenever I choose it, I have just one cheat meal. And at the same time, you have to perform at the highest level. You have to train as a motherfucker all the time. And you have like 1,800 calories in your body and you burn 4,000 calories. So you are wasting so much energy, but you aren't getting back a very low.
So that fucks with your mind. Right?
That fucks with your mind. And you don't feel happiness, you feel like stressed, depressed. You don't find the happiness in anything. They could bring you all the money in the world, but you don't give a fuck at that moment about anything material.
So you're doing it all through camp, but when you get to fight week, what do you weigh at?
We do the water load. I start on Sunday with 8 liters, and I don't have carbohydrates. I don't have any sodium, salts, and all that.
Do you drink distilled water?
Still water, yeah.
Oh, distilled? You know what I'm saying?
No.
Just
Just normal water. I'm not having carbohydrates, sodiums, and fibers. You say fibers?
Yeah.
Fibras?
Yeah. Yeah.
I only have fat and proteins in a very small portions. And I drink 8 liters also on Sunday, then 8 again on Monday, 6 on Thursday, Wednesday I drink 4 I think, and then on Thursday I don't drink anything till Friday, till the weigh-ins.
Really?
And before the weigh-ins I start dehydration, the dehydration. Like we do one session in the morning and I have to lose almost from 2 to 3 kilos, and the rest I have to lose at night because I always like to go to the bed on weight. I don't like to wake up in the morning and have to cut the last part in the morning on Friday morning.
When did you start drinking wine before weigh-ins?
I did it twice in my career. It was once in Las Vegas. I was supposed to fight with. I was fighting with Damon Jackson, and I had like still 6 kilos or something like that. That's a lot of weight to cut. And the guy who was taking care of my nutrition, he called us and he told me, drink wine, drink half bottle of wine. I'm like, you sure? Yes, he told me, because if you drink a liter of wine, you're gonna wake up the next day if you don't put anything else in your body with 2 liters less.
Dehydrated.
Yeah, because the alcohol, it's gonna provocate the dehydration. I did it and it works. And
Wow.
after that, I did it in my next fight. But then I was like, oh, I don't feel good. I don't feel good doing this in the weight cuts. This is kind of crazy. It's fun. It's fun because everyone wants to, I don't know, everyone is almost dying that night. I was like partying with my team, so skinny, drinking wine. I'm like, what the fuck we doing? And after one day, I have to face a monster inside the octagon. Experience it.
And so then you weigh in, And then what is the rehydration process like?
So I used to drink the electrolytes, and till I don't start to pee, I don't put any food in my body. I drink almost for 3-4 hours in small portions. And right now, we are so lucky that we have the Performance Institute. We have great nutritionists in that program that help us to do it from the right way. So I started drinking a half liter of electrolytes. For example, let's say for 20 minutes, I have to drink that. I can't drink more. Then one that 20 minutes passed, I have to drink the another bar, and like that, progressive.
And so once you start to pee, then you allow yourself to eat food.
Exactly.
And what kind of food do you eat?
Most likely carbohydrates. I don't used to eat any proteins because it doesn't help you at all to have a great performance inside the afternoon, right? Because the protein doesn't give you any, how to say, glucose that your body needs at that time. Everything you need, it's electrolytes and carbohydrates. That's all you need, not even fibers.
Okay, so like what kind of food, like pasta? Like that
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
pasta.
How good does that taste after all that time?
Amazing. You could cook the pasta for me that day, and I don't know how good you cook, but it will be amazing. Amazing. I don't care about.
So you've
whatever.
gone so long without carbohydrates.
I have like almost a week and a half without carbohydrates, and I'm struggling for 12 weeks because I have only one cheat meal. So once I finish the cheat meal, I know that in 1 week, I'm not gonna have another cheat meal. So I'm gonna have to eat whatever they tell me to eat. Like I wake up, I know that I'm gonna have 2 eggs with 1 slice of bread, and I'm gonna have to train I don't know how much in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'm gonna have to train again, and I'm gonna have the same food all the time. And the good thing about that is that my wife, she was like a very important opposite of that. That's the best.
Look, the guy developed a spinning back kick at 36. Didn't have a spinning back kick his whole career. Then all of a sudden knocks out Stipe with a spinning back kick for the heavyweight title at 36, 37 years old. That's crazy.
And they showed me a video 3 days ago, 4 days ago. John, before the fight with Steve, he was practicing that kick at the day of the fight.
Yes.
And he said something like, "This is the kick. I'm gonna knock him out with this kick." And the guy showed me the video.
That's crazy. Well, John's fight IQ is insane. Insane. Yeah.
He's a smart guy.
And did a lot of his career partying, which is even crazier. Like, diminished his body, did coke. Like, one of the things he said to Daniel Cormier, which is one of the coldest things anybody's ever said. He said, "I beat you when I was on coke." That's such a cold-blooded thing to say. It's so cold-blooded.
Crazy.
It's so cold-blooded.
He's so crazy.
He was so good. But he was so good, he was better than everybody in his division, so he didn't work hard. But then when he has to work hard, he's fucking terrifying. Like when he fought Alexander Gustafsson, barely trained. They said he barely trained. Barely was in the gym. They were really worried about him. Greg Jackson said they were even considering not letting him fight. Like, you shouldn't be fighting. You're not training.
Yeah.
And then he guts it out in the final rounds, wins the decision, very close fight. Then they have a rematch. And in the rematch,
Yeah, I
he
remember.
fucking trained.
Yeah.
And then he just destroyed him in the
The
rematch.
first fight was very competitive.
Very
The second
competitive.
one, yeah,
Not competitive at all. Yeah, when John is focused and John is in shape and training, he's the greatest of all time. I think he fights Aspinall because I think it's going to be a lot of money. It's glory, and look, Aspinall's amazing. He's unbelievable. He's fast as fuck for a heavyweight. He's big. He can grapple. Black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got knockout power, but he's never been in deep water. Ever. I don't even know if he's gone to a
Listen,
second
I don't
round.
want to say that he doesn't have any chance because everyone has it. One punch can change everything inside the octagon. Of course, everyone thinks that John Jones is gonna get it, but you can't count him out at all with Tom Aspinall. But I don't think that he's gonna come back. Me personally.
I'm under a lot of difficulty.
Oh, really? Wow. I don't even remember that. And then he TKO'd. Yeah. That's kind of crazy if you look at his career. It's all 1 and 2. And then in Bama, he had a two-round fight. That's great, but it's also not great because he doesn't have any deep water experience. You know, if you're fighting a guy like, imagine if he fought Stipe when Stipe was in his prime, or he fought Kane. You can't have 1-round fights and expect to beat Cain Velasquez in a 5-round war, because the chances are you're not going to catch him in the first round, and his cardio is just like an alien.
Yeah, but at the same time, you don't know how he's gonna look at the 4th and 5th round.
Right, he might be great.
He might be great.
Sure, he might be great, but he doesn't have that experience. So in his head, you've got to think there's got to be some, no matter how confident he is, there's got to be a couple questions. If you've never been to, like, John has no questions, right? There's no questions in John Jones's head. He's gone through 5-round wars, like the Gustafsson fight. 5-round war, no training, wins. He knows that he's got what it takes. He's got heart. It's undeniable. So there's no questions. But with Aspinall, it's like, yeah, he can get everybody out of there. He's got the confidence that he gets everybody out of there. That's for sure. Like, he's got the confidence that he connects. He's so fast and athletic for a heavyweight. And he's a legitimate heavyweight. Like, Tom Aspinall's not making 205. He's big.
He's big.
He's a
That
big
guy is
fucker.
big.
He's big.
That
So
guy's
for him, you know, it's...
But John Jones is special.
He's special. He is special.
And he has that fight IQ. He's not that type of guy that he walks in and, for example, I don't know, Francis Ngannou. You know that he got that one-punch power, but he doesn't have the same level of fight IQ as John Jones.
Right.
You know what I mean? With John is like, if he feels that you are dangerous in the striking, he's gonna grab your legs, try to maul you a little bit in the ground. Then if you go in the second round with him in the striking, you're gonna be tired.
He also beats the fuck out of your knees. That front leg side kick to
Everything.
the knee, the oblique kick to the knee.
He's a bad guy. He wants to hurt you.
He's trying to fuck you
Yeah.
up.
He doesn't care to go with the elbow, with the knee. He wants to hurt you.
John, when he fought Thiago Santos, at the end of that fight, Thiago needed 2 knee surgeries. Both of his knees were destroyed, and he was basically never the same fighter since. Ever after that fight,
What happened with that guy? I never saw
Exactly.
him. Never ever.
Well, he fought again after that, and he left the UFC, but his knees were never the same. He had multiple knee surgeries after that fight.
Crazy.
Both of his knees got kicked out. I mean, he was front leg side kicking the shit out of his knees.
And what about you used to train sometimes?
Sure,
MMA,
yeah.
jiu-jitsu, what
Mostly
did you-
jiu-jitsu. I did Muay Thai. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started in Taekwondo, and then I started
I would
jiu-jitsu.
love to share some training with you.
I would love to share some
Yeah.
training with you too. I want to see what you do,
Yeah.
man. I watched you grapple with Marab. I was super impressed. I watched the video you grapple. I'm like, anybody that could do that to Marab, like, holy shit. Because people think about you, they're scared of your striking. But one of the things, like, you opened up a lot of people's eyes in the Ryan Hall fight. Because Ryan Hall was this weird puzzle. He was like this elite Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who did a lot of strange things. Like, he would turn his back to people
Crazy.
and do weird things. Heel hook BJ Penn like that in the first round. Like,
With that Imanari roll.
yeah. But when you dominated him like that, I was like, Jesus Christ. And then you put his lights out. I was like, wow. Because people think, when people see a guy who could strike like you do, they kind of forget about the ground game. You know, they forget that your ground game is very elite too. You know, which is really interesting because you tend to put people in categories of danger. But with you, it's all danger. Like, you have a very well-balanced game, you know, which is unusual. Like Pereira, for instance, doesn't have a balanced game. You know, his game is, he's going to connect and you're going to wake up. You know, that's all it is. His game is kickboxing. But your game is like, it's everything. It's all over the place. You know, like the Bryce Mitchell fight. It's everywhere. It's stand-up, it's the ground, it's comprehensive. It's like George St. Pierre when he was in his prime. It was coming from all different angles. You never knew if he was going to take you down. You didn't know if he was going to strike with you. It was all, your mind was overwhelmed with possibilities, which is, in my opinion, what I like to watch. That's what I like the most. A guy who can do everything. I love specialists. I love like Damian Maya, because when Damian Maya would get you, he'd clinch you, like, oh, you're fucked.
Back, you're fucked.
To this day, the one fight that drives me the most crazy, where a referee fucked it up, was Kamaru Usman and Damian Maya. Because in the first round, Damian Maya had Kamaru Usman's back, standing up, had one leg laced, had his back, but it was taking too long, and the referee separated them. And I'm like, you motherfucker. He's so close. He's so close. This is it. Look at this shit. Like, Kamaru Usman's in deep shit here. He's in deep shit here. And the referee fucking separated them. This is crazy. This referee, this drives me nuts. Go back it up a little bit. Back it up a little bit, because it's before this. It's before this. So, like, once he finally secures it, go a little bit before that. A little bit before. A little bit before. A little bit before. Look, do it right from the moment where they clinch up. Okay, right here. So as soon as he clinches up and he ties that leg, as soon as he gets his hands together, Kamaru's in deep shit right here. Deep shit. Kamaru has one loss on his record, and that's by rear naked choke. And now he's grappling with one of the best to ever do it. To this day, this fucks me up. This is one of the reasons why I hate when they separate fighters. I hate when they stand people up, and I hate when they separate fighters. This is a huge mistake here by this referee, because you've got one of the greatest ground specialists of all time.
Do you think that he was the most dangerous guy in the ground?
Yes.
Yeah.
In his prime. In his prime, he dominated people. This is so close, man. Kamaru's in real trouble here. The way his arm is compromised behind his back, he's fucked here. You gotta get out of this. You can't get separated just because the crowd's booing, the referee's like too involved. Get the fuck out of there. Get out of there and let him work. Because if he gets to the ground, Kamaru might be fucked here. And there's 2 minutes to work. There's plenty of time. To this day, that drives me nuts.
He's doing something very interesting there
with the butterfly. Yes, with that left butterfly. Yeah, he's constantly keeping you off base. And you know that if you make any mistakes here, that right hook is coming over, the arm's coming over the top. As soon as he lets go of it, yes. So as soon as he lets go of that arm that he's got trapped, with his left arm, as soon as Kamaru, if he gets that arm over the top of the shoulder, Kamaru's fucked, man. This is a terrible spot to be. And for the referee to separate them and not let him work, I was talking to Matt Serra about it the other day. He was like, yes, they fucked them. Yeah, he fucked them. They fucked them. Kamaru wins this fight, and then, you know, the world changes. It changes. Because this could have been a loss, and then Kamaru could have been back to the drawing board. It's a bad situation to be in with the ground. See, look, now he has this advantage of being able to stand up again. Like, why? Why does he have this advantage? Why? You should be back where you were. There's no reason to separate those guys. Referee mistakes are crazy. You know, like, there's moments in fights where referees make mistakes where a fighter's whole career just changes, just flashes before their eyes.
The other day, also something happened in the car with Dan Egan.
Yes.
I don't know why he stopped the fight.
Yes, that was a bad decision too. That was bad as well. Same thing. Sean Woodson. Yeah.
I think he would win the fight anyways, but he didn't have to stop the fight.
It was a bad stoppage. It was a bad stoppage. Yeah. Yeah, there's bad stoppages, man. I mean, it happens. It happened to Jared Cannonier. Jared Cannonier had a bad stoppage. I guess, who was that against? Was it Himalayan?
War stoppage? The Robert Lawler against Ben Askren.
Oh, yeah, that was the worst one. That was the worst one. They thought he was out. He wasn't out.
I was so excited for that fight.
Robbie was beating the fuck out of him, too, before that headlock. Yeah, that was terrible. That was a bad stoppage. Yeah, there's been some bad stuff. But, you know, look, referees have the second hardest job in the sport. The first hardest job in the sport, yeah, here it is. This is Jared Cannonier and Emil Bob. So he gets cut. Look at that right there. That's crazy. That's a crazy stoppage.
He stopped the fight? Why?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, look at this. He got hurt, but he's covering up. And by the way, Jared Cannonier can fucking take it, man. He comes back. Jared Cannonier came back against Rodriguez in his last fight. He was hurt way worse than this, and he came back to score a knockout. But that's a crazy stoppage. It just, like I said, referees have the second hardest job. Fighters have the first hardest job. Second hardest job is being a referee. Because those moments where you make a decision, like, you can't take it back, the fight's over.
That's true.
It's terrible.
It's hard to be a referee.
Yeah.
It
And
is.
then there's the judge. Some
The
judges.
judging, yeah,
How do
that's
they-
also something that drives me crazy. It's like,
How do they keep having the same bad judges come back again? That's what's crazy. Because the UFC has no control of the judges. The judges are all established by the athletic commission.
yeah,
So sometimes you get great judging, and you're like, oh, the judge is good tonight. These are good decisions. And sometimes you get, what the fuck is going on?
yeah,
Sometimes judges are horrible.
horrible.
Doesn't make
You
any
never
sense.
know if they give you more points for wrestling, for
Right.
striking, for defending.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, some judges just aren't qualified. Right? They don't have a martial arts experience. They don't have a background. They just learned how to judge. You can't. I don't think you can do that. It's like I don't speak Spanish, but if you taught me some Spanish and then I was judging Spanish, would I?
Oh,
With
yeah.
the, you know what I'm saying? Like
That's crazy.
I'm not qualified,
Crazy.
right?
You are not.
Right. So if you have a guy who doesn't really understand who's got the dominant position, like maybe you see a bullshit guillotine that has no chance.
It's not like they
yeah.
never fought. It's they not even never trained.
Right. Exactly.
Most of them.
I
That's the
remember
problem.
early on in the UFC, one of the judges turned to one of the people next to this person. She turns to this person and goes, "What is he doing?"
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, what is he doing? Someone was trying to get a Kimura. She said, "What is he doing?" She didn't know what a Kimura was.
So how'd they get there?
They were boxing judges. So the boxing judges, they started using them for MMA fights with no martial arts experience at all. Never stepped on the mat, never put in a mouthpiece, never
What's
got
that?
punched in the
What he's
face.
doing?
That's crazy.
That's crazy. They don't know how it works
And they're judging at a professional world championship level.
at the highest level.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
I
Let-
think they should have more judges.
Let me ask you something. What do you think was the key of success of the UFC? Like there was Dana White, there was the matchmakers, there was the fighters, there was the promotion. What it was?
I think the big thing was the Ultimate Fighter. I think everybody kind of agrees with that. The Ultimate Fighter reality show, what made the UFC huge was that first season of the reality show because it,
Like even right now I'm here, I feel your passion. It's not like I
Oh,
say it,
yeah.
I feel your passion. Like you're passionate about what you're doing, and that's something that I admire people like you.
well, I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel that way. I don't have to do it. I don't do it for money. I just do it. I mean, this is the only person I work for is the UFC. Everything else I do for myself. Everything I work for myself. I'm self-employed, except for the UFC. But I've been working for them for 3 years. Yeah, 23 years. Yeah, and then before that, I did it 2 years before that, so it's 25 years total.
And when was the moment? Maybe I'm going like too deep, but I wanted to ask you this: like, when was the moment when you feel like I'm succeeding in life? I feel that I'm having success. And what's for you actually success? Like, how do you describe it?
Well, I guess the moment was when I didn't worry about success anymore. I don't think about success. I think about what do I enjoy doing, and am I doing it the best that I can do it. That's what I think about. I don't think, oh, I'm going to make more money. Oh, I'm going to do this, and now I want this goal and that goal. I'm a process-oriented person. I think about the process of what I'm doing, and then the results come. So I think, like, what am I doing? Am I doing it the best that I can do it? And if I'm not, I better either quit if I don't want to do it anymore. If I'm like, that's why I stopped fighting. There was no money in fighting when I was fighting. There was no money. There was no UFC, and I was just getting brain damage for no reason. And I was sparring and having fucking headaches every night. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? And then I would also meet guys in the gym that were punch drunk, and those guys scared the shit out of me. Because back then everybody was stupid too, and like this is 1989. Everybody was stupid. They just beat the fuck out of each other. There was no like sparring, like technical sparring. It was just wars. It was just
Yeah.
fights, always fights.
Gotcha.
And there was no future. And I
Still like that in some gyms.
yeah, a lot of gyms. Some
Me-
gyms are intelligent, but there's a lot of gyms that are stupid.
I don't used to spar.
Really?
Yeah, I don't spar. Only in training camps.
But I see you spar in training camps, so it's
Yeah.
only in training camps.
Only in training camps.
So when you're not in camp, what do you do?
I do like, as I told you, sparrings maybe in boxing, but before I used to go like more crazy than now. Because before I had like more ego, I wanted to prove myself like I can knock you, I can submit you, I
Right.
can do this, and I can. But once like you winning fights, growing as a person, you're like I don't need to prove anything here in the gym. I know what I'm able to do, and the competition is the day when I have to fight. The fight, that's the day when I'm get paid, and that's it. I'm not gonna damage anyone, no more, because sometimes you knock people out, and then you go back home and you feel bad. You're like, I could not make it.
Right.
And he's suffering right now. I sent so much people to the hospital. So much people to the hospital. Like,
I'm sure I've seen a few
rib
videos.
broken, eyes
Yeah.
open.
Yeah.
So much damage that right now I'm like, no, no, no. Sometimes people comes to me like, let's spar. I'm like, I recommend you to know.
I recommend you to not. Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's like your ego can help you because your ego is what makes you want to be great. But at a certain point in time, you got to put a leash on it.
Yeah.
You got to say, not right now, motherfucker.
Not
when
right
I let
now.
you go, when I say sick 'em, then I'm gonna let you off that leash. But not right now. And like that's Marcelo Garcia always used to say that about jiu-jitsu, that you have to open up your game in the gym and don't be afraid of it being tapped. He goes, you got to be open. You got to take chances in the gym and learn and put yourself in bad positions on purpose. And you might lose training sessions, but that's not what's important. What's important is growing.
I see a lot of guys struggling with that. Like they don't want to lose in training.
Right.
I'm like,
Well, a lot of guys
problem.
never develop a guard because they never want to be on their back. There's a lot of guys like that.
Exactly.
They have no fucking guard, which is crazy. It's crazy. There's black belts out there that you get them on their back, they're like a turtle.
Because they don't want to lose.
Exactly.
They don't know how to lose. Like if you top out, no problem. You get
Yeah.
better. Like
Yes.
how I don't put myself in this position.
But that's the fascinating dance of the mind that allows someone to become a champion versus someone to become just a good fighter. Like whether you can figure that out, like when to put your ego on a leash and when to be able to look at yourself objectively, like what you're doing with separating all of your disciplines, I think is very important. I think that's a very interesting way that you put it because I think it's a very intelligent way to approach it. Like get very good at your boxing, get very good at your Muay Thai, get very good at your jiu-jitsu, but do it different, do it separately.
I'd like every week, every Sunday, I sit down and I do my schedule by myself. Like on Monday I'm gonna do boxing a day from this hour to this. Then I'm gonna do afternoon.
And how do you
jiu-jitsu.
decide what you're gonna do?
It
and
depends
when?
on how I feel, what I wanna do.
What you wanna work
yeah,
on.
and what I wanna work on, and where I feel like I have to develop something, what I wanna do, what do I feel in reality. It's not like all the time. I'm gonna do this because I have to do it. No, I don't have to do anything. I choose to do it because I enjoy it. Every time I go to training, I enjoy it. I don't do it because I feel forced. Sometimes in training camp, yes, I feel forced because I feel tired. I don't have food in my body. I don't have any energy, and I have to do it because I'm forced. But outside the training camp, I enjoy it. Even if I retire tomorrow, I would keep training like that. Because that's something that I enjoy. And you said something very interesting before that. Like right now, I'm in the moment of my life where everything I do it because I enjoy it. I don't do anything to make anyone happy. I don't live a life dreaming to have another one. I just enjoy the moment I'm living right now.
That's so important. That is so important. It's so important to be satisfied with your life. So important to just live in the moment. It's so hard for people to do. It's so hard for people to do, especially if you fucked off too many times. You just like made too many mistakes and slacked off and lazy and
this is the best moment we have right now.
right now.
This is
is
the
it.
best moment.
Yeah.
This is who we are.
Yeah, it is. It is.
No one knows what's gonna happen tomorrow. So
And you know what's really important? Hearing a guy like you say this. Hearing a guy like you say this to young people out there that are listening. They're just not sure like how to approach life. Because the way you think about life and the way you decide to approach life can change the whole direction of your future. 100%. And so a young guy is probably listening. Guaranteed there are people, not just one, many young people are listening to you talk right now.
I'm sure that many people could come to you like, Joe, tell me the secret.
Yeah.
There are no secret. There's no bottom for the elevator. Like
Exactly.
everything in life you get step by step. The slowest, the fastest way to get where you want to be.
I was talking to David Goggins about that. You know who David Goggins is?
Yeah.
Yeah. David Goggins said, there's no finish line. He's like, it never ends. Like, it never ends. It never ends. You never make it. You ever feel like you make it? I'm like, you never make it. There's no making it. It's bullshit. One day you don't think about it anymore, but you just, every day you just try to get better. And if you don't feel like that, it's not fun. If you're not really trying to do something difficult and aspire to greatness and just trying to do your best all the time, you don't have satisfaction in your life. With everything.
Some people think that like you accomplish something and that's gonna make you happy. That's a
Right.
bullshit.
Well, you know, I think also there's the poison of social media. Because social media poisons people to think that one day I'm going to make it. I'm going to be like Conor McGregor driving my yacht around. Like, those videos are so bad for you. Those
100%.
videos of people like, look at me, look at my watch, look at my diamonds, look at this, look at my house, look at this, look at these girls. Don't you wish you were me?
100%.
That's
Everyone is
bullshit.
showing you the best part of their life.
Yeah.
No one is gonna show you how they are struggling, the problems they are facing on a daily basis. I mean, like, no one is gonna show you that. No one's gonna show you, look, I have a pimple here in my face. No, I'm gonna use a filter to hide that.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good for young people, that's for sure, because they aspire to all the wrong things. You ask young people today what do they want. Most of them just want to be famous.
They want to be famous and they think that money makes them rich. Your skills make you rich, not the money. If you
Right.
don't have the skills and you don't have the mindset, you're gonna keep poor all the time.
Not only that, you're not going to have the satisfaction of knowing you got really good at something. There's something about getting really good at something that gives you a deep satisfaction that's not available anywhere else. If you just win the lottery, those are the most depressed people in the world. They all go broke. They win the lottery and then everybody wants money from them and then they feel empty and hollow and they don't know what to do with themselves and now they don't have any goals because they have $100 million in the bank. They don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, but in reality, they don't have any ability. They don't have
Right.
nothing to enjoy with.
Right. I say that success comes from not worrying about money. Success doesn't come from making a lot of money. Success comes from, now I don't have to think about that. Money's not the thing. Now I think about, what am I doing? What am I doing? I want to be the best parent I can be. I want to be the best friend that I can be. I want to be everything I do. I want to do it to the best of my ability.
Kind of becoming the best person you could be.
Yeah, the best person.
That's
When I was a kid, my martial arts instructor told me this that I'll never forget, and I say it all the time. Martial arts are a vehicle for developing your human potential. Through that struggle, through that difficult thing, you will learn how to be better at everything. 100%. That's what I think life is about, and that's why martial arts are so exciting to me. You know, people think, oh, you like violence, like this. Like, that's not it. That's why I don't like slap fighting. I think it's stupid. You stand in front of each other, smack each other in the head. I want to see a guy enter into a cage fully prepared with skills against another guy fully prepared with skills. I always describe martial arts, mixed martial arts in particular, as high-level problem solving with dire physical consequences. That's what it is. It's problem solving with dire physical consequences.
that's so cool.
Yeah, that's what it is.
People, most of them, they didn't understand what's behind a fighting game. It's not like only violence. You have to prepare yourself. You have to be smart. You have to work smarter than the other guy you're gonna face. There's so much factors that it's gonna play out that it's so much sacrifices that someone has to make before getting inside that octagon, it's not only fighting. It's more than that. I don't know. I love that. I don't
Yeah.
know, most of the people before, they used to see fighting as something very violent in Spain. They hate it. Right now, it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger in this.
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe God Sav is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan was on the side of Israel.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman Hughes.
Yeah. I've had,
Coleman did it for 20 minutes. So it's quite useful.
no, I mean, none of them, and none of them is why they're here. You know, it's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally,
No, just with the guests.
the,
you've had.
the guest, yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
But why do you think that is? I'm just interested in your selection of guests. You feel like the world's not on podcast.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But can I just?
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
it's your
sure.
show. But
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
If you're going to interview historians of the conflict or historians in general, why would you get somebody like you?
Yeah, but Ian Carroll, I didn't bring him on for that purpose. I brought him on because I want to find out, like, how does one get involved in the whole conspiracy theory business? Because his whole thing is just conspiracies. You know?
But do you have any? I mean, there's been a tilt in the conversation, both conversations, in the last couple of years, and it's largely to do with people who have appointed themselves experts, who are not experts.
You mean like Ian? I don't think he appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert in church?
Oh, Daryl Cooper does not think he's an expert.
No, in fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, oh, I'm just a history
Have you
guy."
ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like
I
that?
tried.
Yeah?
It's pretty hard to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk. Or I don't know about this. Or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not
I think that's a
exactly
little
that's
bit
not
out of
exactly what
context.
Daryl was saying. I mean, Daryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Daryl's saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain
But
his
there's,
position.
if you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing. You're not raising questions. You're not asking questions. You're telling me.
You think Daryl's doing that?
I think there's a whole bunch of guys doing that.
I think-
Dave is doing that. Very obviously. Dave's a comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
No, I don't know if I'm mainly
No.
talking about Israel.
That's
but
all I see you
have
on the internet
opinions.
doing.
Yeah, but that's you
Well, that
just
might be what you've seen,
it's
but
just
I don't
you
think that's.
So
consuming
that is
clips.
so that is also your shtick now, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean by that's my shtick?
Well, you're not a geopolitics guy in general, are you?
I don't even know exactly what you're asking.
I'm saying you've decided, being a comedian, you've decided now to become somebody who talks about Israel.
This
and
is
the
not,
conflict.
I think you're incorrect. I don't think it's a decision. I just think you have long-form conversations, multiple of them. It's a huge event that's in the news, so it comes up. I don't
I
think
know,
it's a
but-
thing. I think if you're on the outside, you'd say, oh, look, they're trying to get attention by talking about this very polarizing issue
Yeah.
publicly. That's
But they
not,
you do get attention from that. If you'd spent the last year speaking about Myanmar, you would not be on my lips.
Yeah, but
or a
he
lot of other
does
people.
talk about Yemen constantly. He talks about a lot of things that aren't in the news.
Well, I
constantly.
tend to talk about the conflicts that my government is directly involved in, which I think is reasonable to me. But I don't quite get, like, what's all the appeal to authority stuff? I mean, would you
Well,
have to
I
be an
think-
expert? Or
No, I
and
think
what exactly
authority
makes
matters.
you
I
an
think
expert?
authority matters, and I think that if you just throw a lot of shit out there and then say, I'm not interested in the alternative views on this, and particularly when it's a counter-narrative that is wildly off. And when you get people, look, I just feel, we should get it out straight away, I feel you've opened the door to quite a lot of people who've now got a big platform who have been throwing out counter-historical stuff of a very dangerous kind.
You mean Daryl? You talking about Daryl?
Daryl, who's the other one?
I don't think Daryl has.
Derek.
I don't think there's anything
Derek,
dangerous
what's
about
the
what
other guy? Derek.
No, that's
No, that's Daryl
Daryl
Cooper.
Cooper. Who's the other one? The one I just checked on the way here. Daryl Cooper. Oh, yeah, Daryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. Look, these guys are not historians. They're not knowledgeable.
Well, no one's calling Ian Carroll.
No,
a
but
historian.
then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Daryl is
Why
incredibly
listen-
knowledgeable.
No,
it's just
he's not.
Yeah,
he's
he
not.
Is.
He's
Why do you say that?
wildly. Several reasons. One is when he was offered to debate the current greatest living biographer of Churchill, he said, "I can't because he knows much more than me, and I admire his work and I've learned from it, but I can't possibly debate him." That's Andrew Robbins.
Right, but you don't have to be able to debate people to have opinions.
No,
on
you
things.
don't have to debate people.
If
But
it's not
you-
your thing.
But if you, for instance, well, okay, but if you say, "I've decided that Churchill is the bad guy," in
It's not what he
World War
said.
II,"
It's not what he said. It's not what he said.
neither Carroll nor Cooper have said that.
Well, listen, I don't know what Carroll said, but Daryl Cooper has not said that. What he said was he jokes with his friend Jocko, who's an Anglo-Saxon. He jokes with him. You know, I think that Churchill was the secret villain of World War II. And what he's saying is by Churchill's actions, the war escalated. He's not saying anything.
He's not
that-
just asking questions, is he?
No, but
he's
that's,
got a
the
point of
claim
view.
isn't that he's just asking questions. Yeah, he has a point of view.
You can explain this better. He
Well,
literally says
yes, he
he's
said
joking.
in the comment, he goes, "Listen, I'm being hyperbolic," and then he once again disclaimed. He goes, "And I'm not claiming Churchill committed the most atrocities or was the worst part, but in many ways, I do view him as the chief villain." As my hyperbolic, provocative statement. But
What's
Douglas,
the point of that?
well, okay, but Pat Buchanan wrote an entire book on this. Is he not allowed? Is he not an expert? Is he not allowed to be
He's
interviewed?
certainly not an expert. He can be interviewed. I've watched Pat Buchanan debate. I watched Pat Buchanan debate against Churchill historians, and he was absolutely level because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
When did Pat Buchanan debate and get level?
About 20 years ago.
I'm just
He
curious. I
debated
haven't seen
against
it.
Andrew Roberts and several other historians at Intelligence Squared in London. I was there. He didn't know what he was talking about. He had a contrary view, and it was interesting and stimulating to hear. But if you only get the contrary view, which is, isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century, at some point you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's horseshit of the most profound kind.
I don't think that's what he's trying to
I
do.
think that's exactly what they're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions, and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along, partly I think because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions. And then if you say that's wrong, they say, I'm a comedian.
But wait a minute. No,
What do
no,
I?
no,
What
no,
am I?
no, no.
What? How can you tell me
no,
I'm
no.
just a comedian?
Well,
I'm
what-
just throwing
what,
stuff out.
What horrific opinions that's wrong are you talking about specifically?
Once guys like this get into very obvious stuff, which is
Guys like Daryl?
the ones I'm describing.
You
very
need to
clear.
listen to Daryl to really understand what he's saying. If you take Daryl's words out of context, Daryl has some of the most nuanced, balanced, and charitable views on all the figures in history.
Well, particularly Hitler, it seems.
No,
just
you're
not
wrong. You're wrong. He doesn't. What did he call him? How did he describe him?
I think he compared him to a methed out psychopath who was holding an entire nation of people hostage, I believe was the way
He also
put it.
said on here that he wasn't anti-Semitic until the Holocaust. There were no speeches of Hitler's in the 1930s.
You know, again, this is
No.
Listen,
Is this on your show?
No, he said he was not public about
He said
it.
he was downplaying it to win over. He said there was a
Yeah.
period where he was downplaying it to win over popular support in Germany.
Yeah.
His argument.
There is no historian of World War II who thinks that Hitler was downplaying anti-Semitism in the 1930s. That was what he was doing. He wrote a book about it in the 1920s. He got to power on it, and he grew his power on the back of it. The idea that you can argue that in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler was downplaying the anti-Semitism, like, there's no historian who would agree with that. So why would you throw out the idea that in the 1930s, Hitler was not being anti-Semitic in public? That was what he was doing in public. He announces to the German parliament what he wants to do. So when you're throwing out claims like he was keeping it down in the 1930s, first of all, what are you doing? And secondly, why?
Okay. I mean, I think that it's kind of hard because I don't even know exactly what Daryl's point on that was, and so I'm not really in a position to argue what he was saying there. I don't think you're giving him the most charitable interpretation.
I don't need to give him the most charitable interpretation to be able to see
Okay,
what
I think you're
he's
strawmanning
doing.
him, I should say.
Look, anyone can look up what he said on this show and others, what these two guys in particular have said on repeated podcasts with both of you. It's an attempt to downplay Hitler and always to do down church.
I don't think you downplayed
in
Hitler.
You're saying
whatever
I've
way they
downplayed
can.
Hitler?
No, I said in conversations with you and others, this is the shtick of these guys. They've decided it's edgy and funny, and I think this is very, very interesting and also very dangerous. Because we live in an era now that the right has got some mojo back in America. We saw years of crazy left overreach, where they tried to make us all say the craziest things. And completely predictably, there are now figures on the right playing with really dark and ugly stuff on their side.
I agree
and
with
they
that.
are mainstream.
I don't think
and I
Daryl's
think it's
doing that.
partly being mainstreamed by the two people I just described. And both of you have kept speaking to these people, and you don't get on the historians who know about this. And that's just alarming to me.
Well, can I just say, so because I kind of do agree with part of what you said there. Like, I do think it is true that almost as a reaction to like the woke insanity that we've seen on the left, and I think literally, I think nobody's been a more effective critic of that than you. I do think there has kind of been a right-wing reaction that has embraced racialism and is dangerous and not a good path
Yeah,
to
and
go
now
down.
they're flirting with
Now-
Holocaust denial and
Yes,
Hitler
but you're
and
not-
absolving
but
Hitler
I
of
think
blame
you're
and much
wrong.
more.
I think you're wrong to include Daryl in that group. Now, the other thing is, I'm sorry, because maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. You're saying people that I've had conversations with
These
have
two guys are
downplayed the
examples of
Holocaust.
this.
Well, who are the two guys?
I
Daryl
just told
Cooper,
you, Cooper and the other
Ian
friend of
Carroll.
yours, and Carroll.
I've never podcasted with Ian Carroll. I have podcasted with Daryl Cooper once, and he absolutely did not downplay any of the Nazi atrocities at all. And I think that if we're zooming out here a little bit, maybe this is kind of part of the disconnect. Broadly speaking, in American culture, the idea that it has not been driven into people enough that the Nazis were bad and that Adolf Hitler he is literally the modern devil. He is much more so than the actual devil. Adolf Hitler is
He's like 6'7" or something crazy like that. Built that way. Wow. But he does a lot of carrying stuff and walking stuff. And
Yeah.
He feels like it's very important for like your overall strength.
I
is
think I
to
would
be able
agree
to
with that.
walk, not just to be able to sit there and push stuff and do squats in place, but to move with things where you're balancing and counterbalancing, moving left foot, right foot.
Yeah.
And I think there's real benefit to that. you
I
know?
like the single arm, farmer carry.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense, especially
Yeah.
just trying to stabilize your spine.
Yeah, I'll do that with like a
Instead of
70-pound
just weight.
kettlebell, and I'll just like walk up a hill with a 70-pound kettlebell. And I can't get very far before I have to put it down because my grip gives out. But I won't
Yeah.
use straps because I think I really want to. Like I've been doing a lot of. I carry this fucker around with me too, because we have this thing in the comedy club where it's like one of those strength
Oh,
things
it
where you
counts
squeeze
and
it.
it has a counter?
Yeah, and I got to 161 pounds of how strong you can squeeze. It's the hardest I've ever gotten. So I want to get to 180. So I've been squeezing.
Just grip strength.
Just holding that motherfucker all the time. This is a heavy
You
one.
got some
Squeeze that bitch.
meaty paws though, bro.
Yeah, I can spit hands. Yeah, just hold that motherfucker. I feel like hand
You have
strength.
to get angry?
No, I do. I like to get angry. I just like to get angry if I can. But hand strength, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
Most of my
Peter T
workout,
talks about grip strength.
it's very important. I do a lot of hanging too. I do a lot of hanging from my back and my shoulders too. Just hang from a chin up bar.
Oh yeah,
I don't like
that's
straps.
good.
I don't use
How long can you
straps.
dead hang?
2 minutes.
Okay, I'm just about there myself.
Yeah.
Just around 2 minutes. I put those weighted vests on and
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Do a weighted vest for short bursts.
yeah,
You know?
I'll take like a 12-pound weighted Aeon vest and I don't think you could do it with a rock, but I do those 12-pound Aeon vests. I just hang. Like this is one of them too. This one's about 12 pounds, but
Yeah, I do one series of all body weight workouts where I do chin-ups, push-ups, and then L, I guess you would be pull-ups, where it's a tight grip, and by L meaning I lift my legs up and I hold them in position.
Paul
And
Saladino's got me doing
all the
that
chin-ups.
now.
So I do that most of the time with no extra weight, but like 2 times a month I'll do it with 25 pounds. So I'll put a 25-pound vest on and do my entire routine with long breaks.
Like a ruck vest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually from Go Ruck. It's 25-pound. It's like a just strap it and Velcro it down. And so I'll do my series of 10 chin-ups, my series of 20 dips, and then 10 L pull-ups. And I'll do
But
that.
you're talking about like the L sits where you're holding the bars and just put your feet straight out.
You put
Those
your feet,
are
but I'm
tougher
not,
than they look.
But I'm not holding the bar down here. I'm doing chin-ups.
Oh, chin-ups,
So
okay.
I'm doing the L like this, and then I'm doing these with my foot straight out. So it's the abs. It's like I'm just trying. I've had like a problem with my lower back, and I think a lot of it came from. I know where it came from. It came from archery, where I was spending too much time pulling one side only. And then also I was getting a little bit of tendonitis, and I was just saying, fuck it, just working
Do
through
you
it.
try to shoot both sides with your bow now?
No, but what I do now is, because my bow is pretty heavy, it's 85 pounds to pull it back, but I'm doing it like when I'm really training hard, like when it's getting close to September, I'm probably shooting 100 times a day. So I'm 100 times, I'm pulling back 85 pounds. So now what I do, and I learned this from Cam, I take a 10-pound dumbbell and I hold it with my right, because I pull my bow with my right arm. So I put a 10-pound dumbbell with my right arm and hold it out, and then with my left arm, I have a cable, like a cable machine, and I'm pulling back the same, I'm mimicking the exact same motion of archery.
I
So
see.
I'm holding, and Cam
So you're
taught
doing
me
this in a gym on a
Yes.
like with just a hand weight.
So I'm holding it like that, and then I'm using the pulley, and I'm pulling the cables back, and I'm holding it for a count of 2, and then bringing it back. Holding it for a count of 2, and bringing it back. So I'm balancing out my back.
Are you a lefty or a righty?
Righty.
So your righty is that's where you're holding.
So my right arm, I'm pulling back. I'm holding the bow with my left arm to stabilize it. I'm pulling it back with my right arm. So now, to counter that, I immediately go to the gym right after. So one of the things I'm noticing is like, boy, I get fucking so sore on my left side now, because this is fairly recent. I've only been doing this for a couple months. The left side to stabilize it, but I think I should have been doing it the entire time. And because I was getting like really bad lower back pain last hunting season, and it was just because of tendons. I was just overusing, because you're stabilizing, right? So you're pulling back the bow, and you're holding it in place, and you're stabilizing on your right side. And after your form kind of breaks down,
Plus all that-
as you get a little tired. Now I just, when I feel my form breaking down, I stop. I just stop shooting. So instead of shooting 100 times a day now, maybe I'll shoot 30 or 40, and I just stop. I won't push, because it's a meathead mentality that my stupid brain like won't abandon, even though I know it's like injuring me.
Yeah.
But this is it actually became a problem, and it was hurting me when I was playing pool, and I did a bunch of things to deal with it. One of the things I did is this thing called New Fit, where they put, which helped a lot, where they put electrodes on your muscles, and then you go through a series of core routines while you're doing that. That helped a lot.
That's cool.
And then incorporating rotational exercises helped a lot. So I have like
Like
a
golf-looking
bar.
thing?
No, I have a bar, like a straight bar, and I'll put like my right leg forward, and so I've got the bar back on the right side, and I'm twisting forward. So I'm doing that. So a lot of rotational exercises, and I'm also twisting up, and I'm doing a bunch of different things to twist. Another thing I do is I sit on a pad with my legs elevated, and I have a kettlebell, and I'll twist it to the side with my legs up in the air. So I'm getting all this rotational exercises into my system now that I didn't used to do before, but I really should have been doing from the beginning. I always did abs. I always did, the hip glute thing where you lean all the way back.
Yeah,
Like
GHD sit-ups.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so I used to do a lot. Well,
Yeah, those are
I
good.
still do a lot of those.
Yeah.
And then back
CrossFit
extensions, but I wasn't doing rotational stuff. And I think that's the difference.
When do you actually? When is hunting season for you? December?
September.
Oh, September.
Yeah.
And where do you go? Like Utah or Wyoming?
Yeah, the photo that you were asking about out front, that's Utah.
No, that's Utah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. And you go
it's
out for like a
gorgeous.
week, and you just
gorgeous. Love it. Yeah.
stay at somebody's ranch out there.
It's just so lovely.
Dude,
Just
I love
everything
it,
about
too.
it is great. It's just I look forward to it so much.
That's why I love the mountains. Like, honestly, I think our long-term plan is to. We've got a beautiful place in Miami. Is to sell that place and get a spot. I mean, continue to develop our spot in Colorado because there's something about these authentic log cabins, glacier-fed spring water, well and septic. Solar-fed electricity.
Yeah.
Like just old school. I mean,
Old
and
school.
it makes you so happy. And I totally agree with you. I wish that people could feel what that feeling is like, and they wouldn't chase a lot of other.
Well, I think there's also some intangible input that you're getting from society that you're not thinking about, but that affects you. That's absent when you're in the woods and you feel refreshed.
It's a
because of
connection
that.
to Mother Nature. I mean, it's a connection to life.
It
and I think
is.
that we've gotten so.
But I also think the absence of society is a thing. I
Yeah.
think, this is going to sound super kooky, but I think even Wi-Fi and cell phone signals, I think they have an effect on you. I don't know how much of an effect. I
Dude,
think
I'll tell you a
you'd be
story
fine.
true story about. So in my house we have this. My wife and I sleep in an EMF-free tent. And I went a little nuts with the biohacking here.
Sleep in a tent
So
every night.
we have these every night that we're home in Miami. So it's a PVC frame. It's like 5.5 feet tall, 6 foot tall, little frame. It's just PVC. It's dirt cheap. And then draped over top of it is pure woven silver fabric. So it looks like a mosquito net that's over our king size bed. And in the back of our bed clips into this grounding mattress, which plugs into the wall. So the whole cage is grounded. And there's no 5G, no Wi-Fi.
That's it right there. Jamie's got a photo of it.
Oh, that's exactly it. That is literally exactly it. I wonder if there.
So that
I wonder if you
protects
push
you from
Gary
EMF.
Brecka's bed in there, if it would show it, because I put it.
Is that what you did?
Instagram. That's exactly what we sleep in. Exactly that.
EMF shielding canopy. See, this
yeah.
is like kooky. This is where you and
I know.
separate.
This is where
I'm not
I know.
sleeping in it.
I
If
know.
I tried to bring that up, my wife would smack me.
Dude, I also have a hyperbaric chamber in our bedroom.
I have a hyperbaric chamber.
In the bedroom?
No, in my house.
Oh, okay. I've got my podcast studio inside of one now.
Inside of a hyperbaric chamber?
Inside of a hyperbaric chamber.
How big is your hyperbaric chamber?
It's huge. It's got 2 Maybach seats in it. It's got like a 52-inch or 54-inch TV. It's got 3 AI-powered cameras. My gym is in the hyperbaric too.
What? So here's the thing.
I have a rower and weights, like a whole set of weights.
There's
inside.
a risk of using electronics in a high oxygen environment.
You don't
isn't
use a
there?
high oxygen environment. Never. I don't think there's any reason to go in a 100% O2 chamber. I mean, none of my chambers will go to 100% O2, so none of them are flammable. You could have a candle inside of there. Theoretically, I don't suggest it, but you
But
could.
they
Yeah.
would tell you to not even wear certain kinds of clothes in the hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, because if you have 100% O2, you can have static electricity. You can light a spark and it can explode.
So what is 100% O2 versus like what you're doing?
So you have to actually put medical grade oxygen into the chamber, which I don't do. But
You don't. So the one that I used to go to, they would give you a mask, and you would wear the mask,
Okay.
and oxygen would get pumped into your mask while you're in the hyperbaric chamber. You
Yeah,
know?
so that's also not flammable. That's probably 92, 93% O2. Pure oxygen, 100% oxygen is flammable. It's just like pure hydrogen gas is flammable.
Right.
So 100% O2 is flammable. I mean, that terrible accident that happened to that young boy in the Midwest here recently, where the hyperbaric chamber actually exploded.
What happened?
Yeah, I mean, this a young, I think he was 5.5-year-old little boy, was in a hyperbaric chamber, and very sadly, the technician left him in there, didn't ground him, and he had a blanket in there with him, and he moved the blanket, and it was static electricity, caught 100% O2. Oh, exploded. His mother was injured too.
Oh my God.
I want to say that both of the nurse and doctor in the clinic have been charged with manslaughter.
Oh my
Terrible, but those are 100% O2 chambers. It's clear. It means important to make the distinction that these 100% oxygen chambers. I mean, these are bombs. I mean,
And why would you have 100% O2 chamber versus what you're talking
so
about?
if you look at some of the therapeutic benefits for things like diabetic ulcers, burns, things like that, where necrosis, tissue necrosis, those make sense in a supervised hospital environment with someone standing up right outside the chamber the entire time. I've been in one time in a place called Bioaccelerator in Medellin, Colombia, and but the home use chambers where you get a prescription from your doctor and you actually get probably what you have. Is yours a soft shell
No.
chamber? It's a hard shell. Oh, okay. So that'll probably go to 2 atmospheres of pressure.
Yeah,
It's really good. So Dr. Jason Saunders, who wrote the book Hyperbaric Medicine with Dr. Dimitri, will tell you there's a lot of benefits at low pressures, like 1.3 atmospheres, which you can get in a soft chamber. And there are a lot of benefits at higher pressures, like 2 atmospheres. So I never go above 2 atmospheres, twice the atmospheric pressure. If you think about what's happening at twice the atmospheric pressure, you're taking the oxygen from the air, which is about 21% sea level, what we're breathing right now, and you're doubling that because you're doubling the pressure. So every 33 feet you go below sea level, you double the atmospheric pressure. So when you get to 2
in spirit and quite elitist, that there's an expert class. They can have opinions on all of these things. It's weird for any regular person
No.
who's just read about it.
Not my view. Not my view.
Seems like what's
No,
what you're saying.
I conceded already. I said a long time ago that I believe much of the expert class let itself and us fall down very badly. And I think that happened in foreign policy in areas, not every area, but it happened in some areas. I think it happened with COVID in many areas. But that does not mean that it's just a free-for-all. No. There are some things we can still verify to be true and can still agree on as baseline levels of agreement in a free society. And yes, everyone is free to air their views, but it does not mean that everyone who sounds off on an issue, whether it's World War II, war in the Middle East, war in Ukraine, has an equally valid point of view. No.
I certainly wouldn't argue. I mean, that to me is just batting down a straw man. I mean, I certainly wouldn't argue that everyone has an equally valid point of view, and I certainly wouldn't argue that there shouldn't be some standards of like who you would want to find interesting and talk to and who you wouldn't. But also, it's like, so let's have the conversation that like I don't know, like if there's if there are experts out there who can smack all of this stuff down or just destroy every point that I make over the years or whatever, like, okay, so then do it. And then let's see.
I know, but, well, that's a bit weird. It's also then it's like the debate me bro thing. But
you just,
I think
you
what
just
you're- I
criticize
think
Daryl
what
for
you're-
not debating.
No, it's fine.
So
It's fine. Yeah, I know. Let me just make the main point. I think what I'm trying to get at, Joe, is that it's a bit like the Twitter algorithm, which is, yes, everyone is and should be free to say what they like on Twitter, apart from whatever the very cringe thing that like immediate incitement to violence. But we all know that one of the oddities of Twitter, including since Elon took over, is that what you hope is a restored marketplace of ideas ends up pushing you really crazy shit.
Yes.
And that is what I'm suggesting is happening on a podcast level and maybe on a wider level beyond that. I get stuff on Twitter I just do not want. I do not want a guy with 1,500 followers who's got some zany new view on something, who isn't an expert but is an expert, to be pushed at me. And effectively what is happening with the Twitter algorithm is happening everywhere else as well. And we're all for the open marketplace of ideas. I want that. I thrive in it. But it is different once you get into the thing of, is something manipulating the algorithm behind? Is the algorithm being pushed on me? Why am I being given this? Why am I not being given that? Why am I being constantly pushed this view? And I think that the answer to a great degree is the same thing in your world as it is in the Twitter world, which is, if you go straight online and you say, JFK file drops, watch live stream of Kennedy historians reading the papers live, you're not going to get any views. No one's going to watch it. But that's what's needed is for the people who know the documents to go through the documents. But you and I know that if, as there was some guy who did immediately, you do something like live stream Mossad involvement in JFK, you're going to milk it. You're going to cream it online. The money comes in. I'm saying that there's a similar algorithm in all of our lives that we're not as aware of as we should be, which is that because we all know this at some level, that there are certain things that get a bit of your base going, or get people going interesting and crazy, and then they start debating it and all that sort of thing. that algorithm of online seems to me to be spilling into the real world.
I don't disagree that there's certainly more sensationalist stuff will get you more clicks. I also don't think it's not really unique to social media or podcasting. I mean, this
No,
has been
believe
true
me, I
in-
write for the tabloids.
Yeah, like, right, this has always been true, right?
um,
So yeah, okay, so it's kind of one of the problems
Yeah, I
of
don't think
humanity.
anybody's arguing against that. You know, it's certainly never my intention when I talk to someone to try to get more views. It sounds crazy, but I'm only talking to people that I'm interested in talking to. And in Daryl's case, it's because I've been a listener of his podcast for years. That's it. This is like genuinely how I pursue things. So that's why you're here. I'm genuinely interested in your views as well, even though you completely disagree with him. This is
Sure.
the marketplace of ideas in
Sure.
real time.
I agree, although, as I say, I think you've massively underrepresented the pro-Ukraine argument and the pro-Israel argument in the last 2 years.
I don't know. I mean, well,
That's my observation.
okay. You're totally allowed to have that observation. What's the pro-Ukraine argument that you think is not being represented enough?
Well, my broad view is that, again, something to do with the algorithm, that anything that is conspiratorial about Zelensky, the Ukrainians in the conflict, does very well. Anything that says, actually, the Ukrainian army is fighting to try to retain as much of their country as they can, doesn't do as well. I think that everything that is pushing the idea that, for instance, the Americans caused it, or something like that, does well. I think everything that says, actually, in February 2022, Vladimir Putin's tanks invaded Ukraine, and they shouldn't have done, doesn't do as well.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that what Vladimir Putin did wasn't horrific.
That's not my point. The point is that after that, there's a whole set of things. Let's look at, for instance, the issue of corruption.
Okay.
Ukraine is a pretty corrupt country by EU standards, by World Bank standards, and it's been a problem, as it is in that neck of the woods. And it's understandable that if the US is one of the countries putting money and arms into Ukraine, then it's going to be a subject of legitimate interest to American people and others. Nevertheless, you end up in this, and I know this because it's the same thing in the old media. You end up on like the new bit of the story, and there's always a risk that you will lose sight of the beginning of the story. For instance, I mean, Putin's corruption is legendary, gargantuan, and not as interesting, it seems to me. The algorithm doesn't push that, and I think that's, to a greater extent, the case with the Israel-Hamas war as well.
Well, isn't there a little bit of a concern? Like, I would say a couple things here. Number one, I'm not denying, I don't know how the algorithm works or what it's pushing, and it's an interesting thing that we probably should all know more about, but I think there's a danger when you're to just classify everything as, well, the algorithm pushes this and doesn't push this. It's like, it could also be that some ideas are just resonating more and some ideas are more popular than other ideas, and there's probably both of those things are at work in that dynamic.
Sure.
But I also think that something like the reason why, say, talking about Ukrainian corruption is more interesting in a lot of ways than talking about Russian corruption is obviously because, like, well, one of these countries is an enemy and the other one is one that we're sending tens of billions of dollars to. And so, yes, debating on between Zelensky and the weapons companies, I don't know. He says he only got $70 billion of it, but we've spent closer to 170, so whatever. But the point is that, obviously, if there is a country that we are propping up, funding, arming, and they're corrupt, I would say my starting point would always be to be more concerned with that corruption than an enemy country, which it's almost kind of a given is a corrupt country. Like, I don't know.
Agree.
I'm sure there are fringes of the right who might say, like, Vladimir Putin's some great guy or something like that. But that is, I really do not think that is the argument that most people who are critical of this, of Biden's policy, are making.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that happens in this is the It just happens an awful lot, and it's the nature of the old news cycle, let alone the current one, social media. Actually, I remember that. Sorry, no, we don't go back to it. Well, let me just very quickly. I remember this debate with Pat McCann, debating much more learned historians on the subject of the origins of World War II. And the whole thing got lost in all of this sort of mad puzzle of views about iron ore production in the Bavarian forest and this sort of thing. And I remember that everyone was all over the place, and the moderator turned to the historian Andrew Roberts and said, Andrew Roberts, why did World War II begin? And he said, World War II began because Hitler invaded Poland. And those moments come along quite often at the moment, which is, yes, there's an awful lot of very interesting things to look into. There's a lot of very interesting things going on which we should all be able to talk about and do talk about. But sometimes you have to remember the origin causes of things as well, and you have to stick to keeping that in mind.
Yeah, well,
I think that a lot of people are pretty bad at the moment of keeping that in mind. Like, you can concede Ukrainian corruption, you can concede all sorts of things, and still not lose sight of the thing of, if Russia rolls tanks into neighboring countries, it can't be allowed.
Oh, well, listen, okay, so on that, I think we have an area of agreement. And I do think, like, even while I much prefer the path that Donald Trump is pursuing to the path that Joe Biden pursued when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and of course this is, Donald Trump's thing, is once you piss him off, he's going to call you every bad nickname that there is. But when he said,
when you don't piss him off.
Well, sure. But when he said,
the Danes come to mind.
What I believe he said that Zelensky started the war,
yes,
or something like that, which is like, okay, all right, that's a little bit ridiculous.
He said Zelensky started the war and Zelensky was the dictator.
Yes. Okay. All right. So
Trump said that?
yes, he did. But it was after
he said
Zelensky pissed him off.
Zelensky started the war?
Yeah. But this is how Donald Trump is. Love him or hate him, for better or for worse. Donald Trump, it's like if he feels that you disrespected him or came at him, he's going to be 10 times more vicious to you.
By the way, this happened 2 weeks before the disastrous Oval Office meeting.
Yeah.
And I wrote the next day the cover in the New York Post, which was a big picture of Vladimir Putin with the headline, "This is a dictator." Just again, as I say, not to lose track in all of the melee, not to lose track of the basic facts.
Well, look, I will say this as somebody who is, I'm very anti-war, broadly speaking, and I do agree with you that it should, we should be able to have conversations about all the things that led up to the war and all the different, blunders that were made, and also still recognize that Vladimir Putin invaded a country and is responsible for, at least hundreds of thousands of people dying. And, my Scott Horton, who I always try to promote on here, he just wrote this book called Provoke. I think it's the best book that's been written on the history leading up to the war between, it basically takes you from the collapse of the Soviet Union up to the war in Ukraine. And even in that book, the book is called Provoke. And the argument is that Western policy was very provocative toward Vladimir Putin, and there were a lot of off-ramps that could have been explored and should have been explored. But he has an entire chapter in the book where he is saying, look, Putin had a lot of other options. He didn't have to do this. It's not as if any of that justifies his invasion. And so I do agree with you that whenever we're talking about a war, particularly a war of aggression, that should always be in the front of people's minds. I mean, you can criticize, I would say, I think I'm consistent on this across the board, you can criticize lots of things about the insurgency in Iraq, certainly, but you should remember that George W. Bush invaded the country when he shouldn't have, and based off lies. So I say that when my government does it, I'll say it when the Russian government does it also. That being said, there's a very strong argument that there were many policies that the U.S., NATO and Europe as well, but mostly the U.S., pursued that were just almost like if you wanted to come to this inevitable conflict, this would have been the policy.
Putin's forces because of NATO expansion. They're fighting because he lied to his own army, he lied to his own people, he lies to the world, and he decided he wanted to gobble up Ukraine because he wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union. And as a result, these young men are in dugouts in the middle of winter, fighting Russian soldiers because the Ukrainians homes are 13 kilometers behind them. And I think among much else, that's stuff that cannot be forgotten about. None of this is simply about NATO expansion or this or that. It's about a country whose people are suffering in their third year of war. And it's almost total war. It's
Yeah.
as much total war as we've got in the modern age. And
But that's not. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm not saying the Ukrainian people were fighting because they wanted to keep their country. People don't very much like being invaded by foreign countries. I understand that completely, and I've also always said throughout this whole thing that is their right. They have a right to do that. We as Americans have a right to, have an opinion on whether our government ought to be funding and arming the thing. But all I'm saying is that I'm not making an appeal to authority here. I'm just saying that you have the top people in the Russian government all unanimously saying, like, this is our red line. You keep flirting with NATO expansion into Ukraine. And then you have all the people at the top of NATO and at the top of the U.S. government admitting it too.
Well,
and
as I
going
say,
like, yeah,
they
this
would-
is the whole beef. So why is it, like, these two things aren't mutually exclusive?
No, they aren't. But, I mean, they weren't going to expand NATO to Ukraine.
Well, they kept flirting with it, and you know this.
The Ukrainians wanted membership, and it was very unwise that ever anyone from the rest of the West
Didn't Kamala
none of
Harris
this-
openly say that NATO was going to join?
Yeah, shortly before the war,
Ukraine was
yeah.
going to join NATO.
Yeah, I never saw her listen to it.
Which I agreed. Now, there's some area of agreement,
That's
Douglas,
Tim
that we
Walz.
can come.
He's the
He's the guy.
Well, obviously, that guy's the future. But okay, but it is still the Vice President of the United States
No,
of
sure.
America, and it's
But
it's
again,
not just.
again, that's not why Putin invaded. But,
Well,
I mean,
you can
he
assert
invaded,
that,
He
but-
invaded because of the thing he's dreamt of since he falling down of the Soviet Union.
Do you know how he dreams?
We know a lot from what he's said and what he's done since the fall of the Soviet Union and his statements. Certainly very early on in his presidency.
Right, but if he does
continued.
have a red line and you violate that red line, is that because he's following his dreams, or it's because
His dream is, as he's said many times, is the reconstitution of the Soviet Union.
I don't think that's exactly what he said. He's alluded many times to like how great the Soviet Union was and what a tragedy it is that it collapsed and things like that. But regardless,
Something we can agree.
what?
Picture.
Oh, I think the Soviet
Disaster.
Union collapsing is one of the greatest things that's ever happened in the history of the world. One of
And
the most
very
evil
largely,
regimes,
yes,
if not the
and very
most
largely
evil
the
regime.
result of American action.
Sure, there were a lot of factors in there,
Just
but
trying
yes,
to throw in some pro-American views.
I will certainly concede that us luring them into Afghanistan played a huge role in weakening the Soviet Union. It came with the minor little price tag of 9/11.
That was the
But
end of it.
okay, that's but that's
That was
no, I didn't say. I said it played a role. I didn't say it was just because of Afghanistan.
Main thing
No,
is the
it was because
stationing of European
well,
troops. around
also
the
because communism as an economic model just doesn't work. It was a disaster and it was destined to
We
collapse.
can
Like
agree on that.
all centrally planned, totally socialist economies are destined
Except
for
that,
bad
yeah,
results.
I don't like the word destined in that because, in my experience, things that don't work can go on an awfully long time.
Well, look, the Soviet Union went on an awfully long time. I mean, it was the.
I thought when I went to North Korea some years ago that couldn't go on for much longer. And on it goes.
Yeah, no, okay, so
You know.
fair point there, but certainly it's going to be, it's a much different dynamic for a communist country like North Korea, who is a relatively small and not expansionist, whereas the Soviet Union was trying to maintain an empire, which is a much tougher thing to do. Look, the United States of America is going broke trying to do it, so it was pretty tough for them to do. All I'm saying here is that, like, if the dynamic, again, it's not just that, like, first off, in 2008 at the Bucharest summit, we announced we were doing it. Now, we didn't give them a map plan, but we announced they are coming into NATO over and over, not just the Kamala Harris comment, over and over and over again through the years. People at the highest level of the U.S. government asserted that this is going to happen, that it's a matter of time. And then 2014, this was a major provocation toward the Russians, that we backed this street protest against the democratically elected government there. And
That's again is tricky because the Maidan protests were genuine students in the center of the city who were uprising against a corrupt government.
I'm not even arguing
And
that
they were
Ukraine's
shocked, and that again is like it's the people of Ukraine, like other countries, and they do have agency beyond what Washington can
Yeah, I'm not
You-
claiming any of those people don't have agency. I'm just claiming that Washington poured $100 million into the thing and sent our politicians over there. Our politicians openly saying, we're on your side. You have the backing of America. Look,
No,
Douglas,
but historically, you know, America has liked to be on the side of people who desire freedom over autocracy.
when it's convenient, not so much when it's
sure.
not.
Well, yeah.
Not
and
in
where-
Saudi
and where
Arabia,
it's
not in
achievable.
Egypt.
I'm glad you joined me on my side of the House of Sound.
Okay, fine. But look, it does
I
attack.
was worried for a moment there.
Yeah, but it does attack your central point there. That it's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, see, this is my beef. My beef isn't ever with talking about the corruption or the evil things that other governments do. What I don't like is this whitewashing over our own corruption and the evil things that are. The idea that America, we have a history of just standing with the people because we love democracy so much. No. We use that as an excuse when we think it's in our strategic advantage. We will overthrow democratically elected governments with no problem, which, by the way, Yanukovych was democratically elected with elections verified by the EU. But I'm not denying any of those kids had agency, and I'm sure a lot of them were protesting against their own corrupt government. But the point is that, like, look, imagine on, I think it was Jeffrey Sachs came up with this, isn't mine, but imagine on January 6th, if, like, Chinese politicians were coming over and handing out sandwiches to the rioters and saying, we have your back. I mean, listen, we would lose our collective minds if another country came in and did something like that, okay? But I mean, we lost our collective minds about Vladimir Putin installing Donald Trump, and it was all just completely made up. It wasn't even a real thing. But so to think, okay,
Well,
those
we
people...
didn't lose our minds on that. A certain subset of
I-
the mainstream
there,
media
you know what?
lost their
You had-
minds, yes.
for
It
me
wasn't
being,
even a subset.
For me being
No,
the...
main set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me being the bisexual libertarian here, you have corrected me on my collectivism several times here, and you are right. Yes, we didn't lose our mind. I am speak, but many other people here did. But you look, I mean, you're pouring $100 million into a street protest against a democratically elected president of Ukraine. And the whole issue is over, essentially, whether he's going to tilt toward an economic deal with Europe or tilt toward an economic deal with Vladimir Putin. I mean, Douglas, like, if anyone did that in our region of the world, DC would overthrow that government, invade in a moment. If China poured $100 million into Mexican protests and was able to overthrow the democratically elected government,
Say, if it's
what do you think DC would do?
change the subject maybe, but Qatar pours hundreds of millions of dollars into this country, billions indeed, and tries to change policy in this country. And nobody's trying to overthrow Qatar. Nobody's trying to overthrow the emir or his family. And they've been poisoning American universities, American institutions, buying up American politicians. They pour billions into this
I
country.
think I just sent you something about that this morning.
Yes, I mean, well, okay, but that is a little bit different than overthrowing our neighbor government and trying to install
Sure, I agree.
a
It's
hostile
different. I'm just saying,
government
you're,
toward us.
you're
Yes.
saying that like we'd lose our mind if anyone tried to interfere here. There are lots of people.
But I
who
wasn't
try to
saying if
interfere
anyone-
here, and the most obvious one is Qatar, which has pours money into DC and into elite institutions and universities in this country. And I don't find from one week to the next anyone who's particularly riled up about it.
Well, so they've been, I mean, so they're pouring money into D.C. And so do you think that they are influencing U.S. policy through doing that?
I think they're trying to, yeah.
Maybe they are trying to.
But
I mean, I don't know.
They're definitely succeeding with universities and others.
Maybe.
For sure.
They should try with the political class more if they're trying to turn us anti-Israel or something like that, because both major parties in this country will fund and unconditionally support Israel no matter what. So, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know
no
what
matter
they're...
what, but I mean, Qatar is definitely trying to influence things their way, as other countries are. I mean, I cited as an example of something that's very interesting, which is an attempt to interfere in American public life, which gets almost no attention. And indeed, the government, whether Democrat or Republican, still seem to adore Qatari, even as they act as one of the backers of terrorist groups across the Middle East and elsewhere. And I cannot understand why it doesn't get more attention.
Well, according to the former defense minister of Israel, they were begging Qatar to pour that money into Hamas.
No, that's not what happened.
Well, that's what he said.
Yeah,
His words, begging.
You're referring to the funding of Hamas in the 2010s.
Yes.
The Qataris poured the money in, and the question on the Israeli side was, what you're allowed to do with funds that go to Gaza, and the Israelis allowed funds to go to Gaza.
I think a little bit more than that. I think when the funds dried up, Netanyahu sent the head of the Mossad in there to beg him to keep the funds going.
Again, I'm not sure. It's like quoting the head of the CIA, quoting the head of the Mossad. Maybe. But
Maybe?
That's not the evidence of the last 18 years.
I mean, so I guess I think I'm allowed to quote powerful people when they admit what they're doing. I mean, it's
No,
kind of
I
like,
know,
you know,
but
like-
again, I mean, it's just an interesting thing. Again, it's a discipline about this, which is, do I only quote powerful people when they say the odd thing that I agree with, or do I simultaneously distrust all powerful people? It's just an interesting rhetorical.
Well, no, I mean, I think that obviously, like, I don't blindly trust anyone in the political class or the media class, for that matter, either. But when they admit things that are like very against their interest to admit, and kind of give away the whole game that now they're pretending doesn't
Are you
matter,
sure? Are you
that's
sure
worth
whether it's the
acknowledging.
CIA or Mossad that it isn't just if they say something you happen to want to be the case?
Well, this is kind of like saying if I were to end on trial and I were to, like, I'm the prosecution and I'd enter into evidence a written confession by the defendant, and you go, well, are you only entering this in because this kind of goes along with your case? Like, I suppose we're all guilty of having these incentives to some degree, but I do think it's a relevant detail that the former defense secretary admitted this. And by the way, Netanyahu's admitted this, Ehud Barak has admitted this. All
They admitted
through-
that they allowed funds to go to Qatar and Hamas because Hamas
For-
governed the Gaza.
for the reason of preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state.
No, that was not the case.
That is what Netanyahu said. That is what Ehud Barak said. It's all
There's
up and down.
one claim, there's one recording of Netanyahu saying something. But look, I mean, we should get on. We should get onto it.
I could read you the quotes from Ehud Barak as well.
No, I
It's
know.
there-
I know.
It's all of them have
Again,
talked about it.
The situation. Let's get onto it. The situation there, and the war of the last 18 months, is a result not of that, but of Hamas deciding to start another war with Israel. And they did.
But you don't think if they were
they-
being propped up by Israel, that has nothing to do
They were
with
not
the group?
being propped up by Israel. The reason why Hamas were in power, as you know, much against the interests of the Israelis, was that they were voted into power after the Israeli coup in Gaza. Condoleezza Rice and other American statesfolk insisted that Palestinians should have elections straight after the Israeli withdrawal. They had elections, perhaps unwisely, and Hamas won, and then didn't have another election again, and ruled the Gaza for 18 years until they finally got the great fruit of their labors on the 7th of October 2023, and went around.
Catering to that portion of your circulatory system.
It would be so fascinating to run a long-term study on twins, identical twins, and have one person just eat the standard American diet and the other person follow all these protocols. Hydrogen gas, fitness, healthy food, no seed oil, no drinking, and just see.
Yeah.
What do they look like after 20
10 years. Yeah, or 20 years. 20 years would be wild.
Wild.
Be like
Yeah.
sending one of them to space, you know. and it's so funny because, you know, we're so wrapped around our medical system that's really 50, 60 years old, 70 years old, and how important a randomized clinical trial is, and placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial that's been peer-reviewed, and all of this. But we negate the Eastern philosophies that very often have been around for thousands of years. And I almost have lend more validity to something that's actually stood the test of time. Like something that doesn't work is not going to last 1,000 years. You know, by virtue of the fact that it doesn't work. When we were in the mortality space, we never used randomized clinical trials. We used big data. And I think what you're about to see now, that I was alluding to before, is we've built an entire system on, you know, the most rigorous scientific study being the randomized clinical, you know, placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial. And so that is the gold standard. And if it hasn't been through this process, it is not valid. Well, we've never done randomized clinical trials on parachutes. But I wouldn't jump out of an airplane without one. Who wants to be in that? Who wants to be in the control group? Okay, Stan.
Yeah.
You line up here, you're getting a knapsack and a prayer book, and we're getting a
That's a
parachute.
very good point. It's a very good point. Where there's some things you really can't run randomized controlled studies on.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we just have data, right? We have really good data. And one of the things I used to get just absolutely slaughtered for was I spoke out about the simple LDL hypothesis of cholesterol, saying that there is no correlation between elevated levels of LDL cholesterol on its own and cardiovascular disease. You had to have corresponding increases in triglyceride, you had to have inflammatory factors, you usually had to have other metabolic factors like hypertriglyceridemia, hyperinsulinemia, and yet everybody, would really come after me for that. And now we're starting to see that the data on statins is really falling apart. Big data is starting to tell us that the extension of life is near zero, but the extension of all-cause mortality is near zero. And then the complications downstream, which we never study. I mean, you'll never find a randomized clinical trial looking at more than one pharmaceutical compound in the same biome. Yet almost everybody at the age of 60 is on 5 or more prescriptions. But we don't study prescriptions in concert with one another. We study them independently. We say, okay, if you have high cholesterol, you're on a statin. Okay, that's independent. If you have, your hemoglobin A1C is over 6.4, you're now insulin dependent. Okay, so now you're on insulin. And you've been a little sad lately, so now you're on an SSRI. And your thyroid is hypofunction, so now you're also on a Synthroid or levothyroxine or on the thyroid. And your blood's gotten a little thick because you're on hormone therapy, so now you are on a blood thinner. We've never studied the compounding effect of all of these different pharmaceuticals in the same biome. We just assumed that the randomized clinical trial in these independent silos is valid, even though we're going to smack all of these things together. One of the things that we learned in the mortality space was the more pharmaceuticals you were on, the easier it was for us to predict your life expectancy. It was extraordinarily accurate. For example, if somebody started a corticosteroid, which is very common for rheumatoid arthritis and other forms of joint pain and whatnot. If you started a corticosteroid, you had, by our data, 6 years and 1 day until you were getting a joint replacement.
Jeez.
6 years and 1 day.
That's the average?
That was the average. So let's say, for example, that...
So why is that?
Because initially corticosteroids are anti-inflammatory, but then they eat the joint like a termite.
Oh, God.
And we knew this in professional sports. A lot of careers were ended early from cortisone injections. A lot of athletes had their careers actually end early because they had too many cortisone injections.
How many is too many?
It sort of depends on the joint and the location. But
One
I
of
would
them
say
can be beneficial?
one of them can be very beneficial. In the acute phase of pain or injury, they can be very beneficial. But what they used to do is, because these were repetitive use injuries, and very often they would just dose the athlete up before a game. So Joe Montana, is one of those careers that ended early, very likely because of cortisone injections. And you keep injecting the same ligamentous tissue with cortisone, eventually you will weaken that tissue and it will snap. First it has an anti-inflammatory reaction, but then it starts to break down the cartilage like a termite. In fact, it was so accurate that very often what would happen is people would get misdiagnosed with conditions like rheumatoid because they had the same symptomology as rheumatoid, but what they actually had was a long-term clinical deficiency in vitamin D3. And you would see that they would have single-digit vitamin D3 for decades, and then all of a sudden they would start to present with symptoms that mimicked rheumatoid. They would say, hey doc, my soles of my feet and ankles are sore when I get out of bed in the morning to go take my first pee. I feel like I had a workout the night before when I haven't. My low back hurts, and my knees and hips and shoulders are stiff. Now it's spread to my upper back. And lately it's kind of hard to make a really tight fist. If you give those symptoms to the wrong primary care doctor, maybe without doing any confirming diagnosis, without SED rates, without RA factors, they go, you know what, Joe, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. Don't worry, I'm going to put you on something called a corticosteroid. You're going to take this pill every morning. You're going to be fine. Methotrexate, whatever it is. And initially you feel great because it kills the inflammation. But then it starts to erode the cartilaginous surface. So if you think about the fact that you had a nutrient deficiency, that you're now being treated with a pharmaceutical. And 6 years and 1 day later, now, by the way, the methotrexate, for example, will give you a gene mutation that will mimic a gene mutation called MTHFR.
Oh, that one.
That one,
That's
the
the bad
motherfucker
one.
gene.
Motherfucker gene.
Yeah, the motherfucker gene. So even if you don't have MTHFR, let's try one of those. Yeah, I might as well try it. Even if you don't have MTHFR, if you take methotrexate, you inhibit your folate metabolism. Cheers, bro. Hydrogen gas, coffee. I actually saw you sniffing something on one of your podcasts.
Smelling salts?
Theo Vaughn. What was that? I
Smelling
don't want to do it, by the way.
You can do it.
No,
Jamie,
I'm not.
shuck one over
No.
there.
I
Give me
brought
a
it up the
freshie.
wrong time.
Give me a freshie.
I'm not doing it.
Here we go.
I just see all this shit over here.
Oh, this is a fresh one. So this one hasn't been opened yet.
What is that?
This is, do you know who Juju Mufu is? Crazy.
Juju Mufu?
Yeah, super well, he's an influencer, but he's like very impressive athlete. Like super jacked.
Dude, if you got a name like Juju
unbelievably
Mufu,
fit
you got to
guy,
be able to beat ass.
incredibly flexible. This is the guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's a freak, like a real freak.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure he's not natural. There's not a fucking chance in hell. But I don't care. But what he makes this stuff. We have no affiliation with him. We buy it. We're not sponsored. So people,
Okay.
oh, you making money off that, bro? No,
Money
no,
off.
no, I'm not making.
Dude, I'm scared, dude. I saw
should
Theo
be scared.
Vaughn almost like,
Brian Simpson took his headphones off and ran out of the room.
no, dude, I'm not getting anywhere near that. No. I'm gonna
God,
sniff
just
it with the
the
top
bag.
on it.
Just
Really?
the bag. Oh, and it's
Give me the
sealed.
bag. I'll do the bag.
Just take a sniff of the bag. Ugh.
This is so wrong.
It is wrong.
Oh my God,
That's
dude!
nothing. That's nothing. That's just the bag that the smelling salt's been
Oh,
sitting in.
oh my God!
So what powerlifters do is they take a sniff of this shit right before they lift weights. You ready? Here we go.
No, I'm zero chance.
Woo! Oh lordy!
Dude, there is
Come on, bro.
zero chance I'm
Get on
doing
in.
that.
Get on in, bro. Come on, reach for it. Peer pressure. Take it. Get it about 6 inches from the nose. Take a haul. It's good for you. I can't guarantee
Oh
it's
my
good
God.
for you. No, that was
No,
nothing.
that got me,
oh,
dude.
you're
That
such a
came in from
baby.
the
Come on, you're a
bottom.
biohacker. You're a real man. Get in there. Take a sniff.
Yeah, I'm a real
sniff.
man. I don't
Get in
do
there.
this shit.
Get in there, bro. Get in there. 1, 2, 3, go. Sniff. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh God,
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. And that was a freshie. The fresh ones are the really hard ones. We have these in the green room at the comedy club. People get addicted. They're all taking
I
sniffs
think
before
I
they go on
lost sight
stage.
in my left eye.
Yeah, it'll come back better. Come back stronger. I have no data to support that, by the way.
Now I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole of that.
You're
Dude,
going to
I
want
prefer
another
my
one in about
hydrogen
5
water.
minutes. About 5 minutes here. Let's see. Give me round 2. Yeah.
Where were we, dude? We were actually
Who knows?
something important.
Anywhere. I wanted- I did-
MTHFR, I think.
I did want to ask you about cholesterol before I forget. Where did the narrative come from that there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and that HDL is good, LDL is bad? You want to lower your LDL, and you want to take a statin. Where did all this?
So, high density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein. The HDL, the high density lipoprotein, is generally considered the good cholesterol, and the LDL, the low density or VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, are considered the bad cholesterol because they're softer, right? But what we know now is that the size of the cholesterol molecule matters a lot. In other words, the smaller the particulate size of cholesterol, the easier it is to cross into the arterial wall. It's eaten by macrophage, and it forms something called a foam cell, which is essentially this foam cell process of oxidized cholesterol is what is the genesis of narrowing of the arteries, right? But again, we have to remember that cholesterol is called to the site of inflammation. So if you had two people, one with cholesterol of 100 and LDL cholesterol, and another one with cholesterol of 129, does a person with 129 have a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease? No. Does the person of 129 have a greater risk of a cardiovascular event? No, just because they have elevated LDL cholesterol. Now, if you start to look at other markers like C-reactive protein, which is a great marker for cardiovascular risk, if you look at triglyceride cholesterol ratio, because remember, fat, triglyceride, is largely transported around the body on the surface of cholesterol. So if cholesterol was a tennis ball, the fuzzy yellow surface would be a fat triglyceride. And if you remember from high school geometry, as the size of a sphere gets smaller, its surface area to volume ratio goes up. So what that means is if I had two baskets, dude, I can still, that thing is, I gotta seal this thing, dude. It's like, I go blind in my left eye. I'm trying to be smart, I can't see out of my left eye. Dude, what is it?
That's a good question.
Ammonia? It's no joke, man. I remember my clinic when Dr. Sarda used to tape these things to the wall because she would do these shoulder injections on people and they would get woozy. She would just crack one of those smelling salts. And
They used to use them
right
for boxers when they got knocked out. When they got rocked and they get into the corner, they use smelling salts and wake right up. Wow. Not really, but.
So let's say you had 2 basketballs of cholesterol. This is an oversimplified version for the audience, but you have 2 basketballs of cholesterol, and they're covered in fat, okay, a triglyceride. And let's say I add more triglyceride to the bloodstream, right? Which happens when you eat high sugar, high glycemic carbohydrate. Why? Because part of insulin's role is to block forms of energy metabolism that would allow you to burn fat, or at least slow those pathways down. So essentially you have two basketballs of cholesterol, and now I want to add more fat to the table. Those 2 basketballs become 4 softballs. If I add more triglyceride to the table, they become 8 baseballs. If I add more triglyceride, they become 16 golf balls. And if I continue to raise triglyceride, they'll become 32 little BBs. So the point is, the amount of cholesterol stayed stable. The amount of triglyceride went up. As the amount of triglyceride went up, the size of the cholesterol molecule got smaller. So the 2 basketballs and the 32 BBs are the same volume of cholesterol, same nanogram per deciliter of cholesterol, just vastly different sizes. Those 32 BBs, very dangerous. Those 2 basketballs, very little danger. One is actually a marker for longevity, one is a marker for cardiovascular disease, and it is the same amount of cholesterol, just different sizes. So different sizes.
I got my blood drawn a couple years ago, and the doctor asked me if I was on cholesterol medication. He said, your cholesterol is really low. He goes, are you on medication? I said, no, but I eat mostly meat.
Yeah, your triglycerides would usually go down. Your LDL cholesterol will go up if you're on a ketogenic diet. Dr. I think it's Nadir Singh is his name. Did an unbelievable. He's a cardiologist. Did an unbelievable YouTube video on this. I actually did a podcast with Dr. Asim Malhotra, who is a cardiologist. Has he been here too?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Love that guy.
Hey, shout out to Asim. He's an incredible guy. And Asim would tell you the same thing, that he fought the British Medical Journal and got publications that he was trying to have published, pulled because he was fighting the narrative on statins, one of the biggest drugs in the world. We knew in the mortality space that the centenarians that we were processing death claims, I don't recall a time during my career when we had a death claim on a centenarian, somebody over the age of 100, that did not have elevated levels of LDL cholesterol at the time of their death, because very often these people would die either in hospitals or assisted care living facilities, and we'd process the death claim, and in order to get the death claim processed, you'd have to know, day,
To be paid for in oil, and democracy will spread through the region. So I don't know. Either take on the arguments or don't. But I don't think
But your argument's incorrect.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then present a counter argument to it. But to just tell me I'm not allowed to talk about something because I'm not an expert.
I'm not saying you're not allowed to
okay,
talk
fine.
about
Well, you're
it.
not
I've
an
said
expert, so you
repeatedly,
shouldn't
you're
talk
talking
about it.
about it
You
now.
haven't been there. Yeah, I know. But you keep playing this game where it's like the whole opening to this podcast was like the non-experts talking about this is such a problem. Now you're saying because I haven't been there, I can't talk about it. Is there a blockade there that's causing economic devastation or not? According to the World Bank, there is.
First of all, I don't think it's a game. I don't think it's a game at all.
Me neither.
I'm not playing a game.
Okay,
Okay?
but this is semantics.
No, but this is important. I've seen plenty of this up close. I've seen plenty of this with my own eyes. Because I do believe that one of the things you should do if you're talking about someone is to see it.
Yeah, you've established
Okay,
that.
but
Is there a
that's-
blockade?
The blockade that existed, to the extent it existed, was a blockade to try to make sure that the Israelis and the Egyptians knew what materials were going in and out of Gaza after the first rocket fires, when Hamas, in fact, before Hamas was elected. The Israelis and the Egyptians didn't do a very good job of it, were meant to be trying to make sure that the materials that went into Gaza were not materials that could be used to build up the Gaza and Hamas war machine. The reason why trucks get searched is not because the Israelis want to search through grain or flour. It's because they wanted to stop the trucks containing the arms and the munitions that the Gazan, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad fighters were going to use to fire against Israel. And I'm sorry, it just makes the most obvious strategic sense. As the late great Joan Rivers once said, as an appeal to authority.
That one I'll allow. That one I like.
She also said that Michelle Obama's a man.
Yeah, I know she did that.
No, I'm saying she
That
got
seems to
everything
be
right. So continue. Go ahead.
But as Joan Rivers said, if New York was being rocketed from New Jersey, we would level New Jersey. I don't think you need to level it, by the way. But you would at least try to make sure that rockets weren't being imported in larger quantities into New Jersey.
Of course.
Okay, that's all the Israelis were doing.
And they haven't turned
All
away
that
any
they were
food or
doing.
aid. They haven't
No.
they haven't said you can't bring potato chips in, or you
give-
can't have cookies because
I'll
they have
give-
dual use.
No,
Isn't this their whole argument that
No.
there's anything that could be used to build a rocket has to be excluded?
Anything that could be used to build a rocket. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a good reason, again, not to build rockets and fire them at your neighbors. It's almost
Yeah, I
like there's
agree.
a cost to play. It's almost like there's a cost to pay for, instead of living in peace with your neighbor, constantly trying to wipe them out. And that is what Hamas did for 18 years. 18 years. This is why I think it's so unbelievable taking agency away from the Palestinians of Gaza, is that the Hamas had 18 years. 18 years is obviously the time from the birth of a child to the end of their formal education. They literally had the opportunity to create a generation in Gaza that wanted to live beside their Israeli neighbors. And from everything I have seen since the 7th of October in the region, and from all of the dead and the survivors and the family members I've seen, so many of them, particularly the people in the south who were attacked on the morning of the 7th, were literally people who dreamed of living in peace with their Palestinian neighbors. They were people like Vivian Silva, whose body wasn't identified for months because there wasn't enough of her charred remains left to even extract DNA from. She spent every weekend, like so many people in the communities in the south of Israel, every weekend driving children with the most rare medical conditions that couldn't be treated in one of the Hamas-run hospitals in Gaza into very specialist units inside Israel. And she spent every weekend doing that and working with Bet Salem and all of these radical left Israeli groups. And it didn't matter a bit when Hamas came in because they burnt her in her own home anyway. My point is, in all of the counterfactuals of this conflict, the most important one is what could have happened if instead of educating a generation into wanting to annihilate their neighbors, Hamas in power had spent 18 years building up a state, teaching peace, creating coexistence with their neighbors. You think any of the people on the kibbutzim in the south or the young people dancing at the Nova party weren't dreaming of the day that the Palestinian government in Gaza would have created those conditions for them to live beside as well? Of course. Right.
Yeah, no, right.
Everybody argues against
nobody's
each other.
argument. Douglas, it's just,
No, I
again,
mean
it's,
here.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not what I'm saying. Look, I'll say this, again, because you bring up the point about agency, again. And I hear this a lot as a counter. Much like I said in Ukraine, it's not denying anybody agency. I'm not saying that. Believe me, if I was in control of how people acted, I would certainly. Palestinians could have handled things much better, and there are different points where we probably all would agree that we wish they had done it this way and not this way. And I think that embracing, for those Palestinians who embrace terrorism, which you know, it was pretty early on. I mean, Israel and Palestine have been at war since the existence of Israel, really. And I know it's convenient to like kind of pretend October 7th was like the first thing, but actually there's a long history here. I'm not denying any of them agency. The problem is that I see it as like you only seem to focus on the agency of one side. And then, you know, if you want to talk about counterfactuals, I think the most interesting counterfactual, well, maybe I'll give you two. Number one would be Chaim Weizmann, who was essentially supposed to be the David Ben-Gurion. Like, he was in line as like the #1 ranking Zionist. This is pre the creation of the State of Israel, who urged all of the Zionist militias to not embrace terrorism. And he ended up losing that battle ultimately. In many ways, this is how terrorism was introduced.
He was the first president of the state.
David Ben-Gurion was. I was saying Chaim
Okay,
Weizmann. Yeah, yes. And he basically ended up losing his position to David Ben-Gurion because they just wanted to be more hardcore. And by the way, the Ergon and the Lehigh and the Haganah, they openly embraced terrorism to drive out an occupying force. This is literally the story of the creation of the State of Israel. The Palestinians fell into a terrible, tragic mistake early on. And I'm saying, listen, I reject terrorism as we all should, just because killing innocent people is wrong. I'd like to get to that a little bit more in a second, because it's interesting that we haven't really gotten into what I think is a great humanitarian crisis here. But they were following, I think in some ways they were very influenced by the Algerian model, that they were like, hey, look, we could embrace, listen, there's a lot of groups, whether it's...
Which Algerian model?
Well, the driving the French out. Right,
So the first Algerian.
Yes, and right, but look, I mean, there's a lot of these scenarios where we look back at Nelson Mandela, for example. You know, Nelson Mandela was not imprisoned because he was, making picket signs. I mean, there have been people who have embraced violence as a means to achieve a policy end, including the early Zionist settlers, including the Israeli government, including the U.S. government, and lots of governments around the world. The tragic, tragic mistake in terms of political outcome from the Palestinians is that they really just underestimated the fact that these Jews had no home to go to. This was their home. And you could drive out the French from Algeria because they go, screw it, we're going back home to France. The Jews had been so persecuted in Eastern Europe that there was no home to go back. And of course, then after World War II, they were here to stay. And so of course it's been a tragedy. And of course a lot of Palestinian actions I wish would be different. I wish Hamas didn't exist. It should be pointed out, by the way, that in 2005, you did mention that it was really part of the Bush administration's exporting democracy around the world that put pressure on them to have these elections. It should also be mentioned that Hamas did not win a majority in one single precinct. They won pluralities all around. So just saying, when we're bringing up this election, half the population of Gaza today is under the age of 18. They were toddlers if they were alive in 2005. Of the other half, that maybe half of them voted in these elections, it was never a majority that supported Hamas. They eked out a victory. And then, of course, there was an attempted coup after that, and that's when Hamas seized complete control. The coup failed. Regardless of any of that, I agree with you that, the Palestinians have agency, and I wish some of them had made better decisions. Now, many of them have made better decisions, and it's still resulted in nothing better happening for them and their people. And so I do find it kind of hard to, lecture a group of people who are going through so much. The level of human suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza right now cannot be overstated. And so, to lecture them about how you're supposed to handle that exactly. But I will say, man, I think there's kind of this selective empathy that you have here. I agree with you, talking about these teenagers being slaughtered at a music festival on October 7th. God, I have little kids. I can't, imagine the nightmare of this happening to somebody's children. But at the same time, we're not having this conversation on October 9th or in November or December of 2023. We're having it in 2025, where the tragedy that's been inflicted on Gaza is orders of magnitudes greater than October 7th. There are just every day people are inundated with images of just dead women and children. This is one of the most brutal wars. And by several metrics that really, personally matter to me, the number of dead kids, I think that's a pretty good one. It's more children have died than in any recent war. I mean, this is it does, I do think there's almost a fundamental framing bias that you get into when people have these debates, and I've had several of them, as you have also. But it seems to me that there's almost an implicit difference in the value that you place on Israeli life versus the value that we place on Palestinians' life. And to even like, we've gone this far into the conversation, I haven't even talked about the fact that like, Israel has, feel however you feel, if you want to argue, I haven't been there, stuff does get through the blockade, okay, fine. This is a captive people, you know, that Israel has dominated since at least 1967. Many of them are there because of the creation of the state of Israel, who used to live in what is now called Israel. And they are just, I mean, the amount of human suffering that's being inflicted on them, when, even as you kind of acknowledged with the George W. Bush exporting democracy, Hamas in many ways was forced on these people. In fact, we saw protests against Hamas just recently. So, I don't know, I mean, that to me seems to be the greatest human tragedy, and I think much more so than you can characterize it as people being pro-Hamas or people being anti-Semitic, but I actually think that the mass movement around the world of people who oppose this war has been that people feel really awful about all these babies and who are being slaughtered.
Okay, quite a few things. First of all, let's just get one term correct. You said you do think it's a concentration camp.
Said it shares many, you know.
And you also say that there's disproportionately heavy youth population in Gaza.
Yes, do you think that's not accurate?
I think the second one is accurate.
Right.
But it's a very strange thing to say that there's a population boom concentration. In Auschwitz in the 1940s, there was another doubling of the population.
No, I didn't say it was.
He didn't say it was a
death
concentration camp. He said it shares many of the
Auschwitz was
characteristics.
Auschwitz was a concentration camp.
It was ultimately a
They did
death
not
camp, no?
Yet it started as a concentration
Yes,
camp.
correct.
You'll notice that people were not doubling in size their number because of the children they could have in Auschwitz.
Yeah, but nobody's
So,
nobody's
hang on.
calling
You
it a
can't-
concentration
you-
camp because it's the
You're
same
saying,
as Auschwitz.
Okay,
I don't
but
know.
let's just at least tidy up the language a bit. Either you think the place is a concentration camp, or you think it's not a concentration camp, and I don't think it can be a concentration camp, or any such term is suitable when you're talking about a place which you yourself have admitted has a disproportionately young population. So that's the first.
I
The
don't
second
think
thing is-
breeding in any way argues against. But okay,
The
I didn't
second
call
thing
it a
is the
concentration
second-
camp either.
Well, you said it has many of the same.
But you
characteristics.
asked him if it did.
Yes.
You asked him if it had any characteristics of a concentration.
Yes, because he said earlier that it did.
Okay, well, all
Long
I'm saying.
before
Okay,
that.
so let me
That
be
speaks there.
much
Long
more
before
precise.
that.
Let me be much more precise. Okay, so I'm not claiming that it is a concentration camp or that it is akin to Auschwitz. I'm saying that it's been under full blockade since 2007. Israel rules the seas, the airs. They control electricity that goes in. They're not allowed to have an airport. They're not allowed to have a seaport. They don't have the freedom to leave without permission from the Israeli government. They don't have the freedom to trade with the world. They don't have a freedom to vote over the government that rules them. I don't know. Call it whatever you want to. That's the situation.
All of which is the result of the election of Hamas.
None
All
of it's Israel's fault. Israel's not
All of it.
responsible for one of the babies that have died of
Okay,
the bombs
well,
that they're dropping.
Let's get onto that now, because you say it's one of the most brutal wars. It's a very brutal war. It's a very brutal war. It's certainly not even sadly among the standards of our time, and it's the most. We don't need to get into the rather statistician, ugly debate about whether or not you follow the Hamas government in Gaza's figures of the death count, which most of the world's media rely on, and which I don't think are reliable to the least extent. But you don't need to rely on that to say that even by the standards of the conflict in neighboring Syria, the highest Hamas death count inside Gaza for the appalling last year is less than an average year has been for the last decade in Syria during the civil war. So
The whole deck. I mean, total far more people died in Syria. I'm not arguing that,
Right.
but you're saying it's less
And-
than any year. I think there were
this
years
is
that
not-
were pretty.
600,000 to 800,000 people have been killed in Syria during the civil war. And I give it as an example. There are far too many examples of wars in the region, the wider world to go to. But I think we get once again back to the issue of language. It's one of the most brutal wars. It's simply obvious that it's an appalling war, but it is not by any numerical or other standards the most appalling war of our time. It's a war that Hamas started because they shouldn't have invaded our neighbor. They shouldn't have tried to genocide their neighbor. Now, if the war can be prosecuted, could be prosecuted, it was always for two reasons. Always for two reasons. The The first one, as stated by the unanimity of Israeli politicians and others, was to retrieve the hostages. We also haven't spoken about, but there are still hostages in Gaza held for the last 18 months by Hamas, including young Eden Alexander from Jersey. If Hamas had not stolen the hostages and hidden them in their tunnels, and if they could avoid electing a terrorist group that invades their neighbors and fires rockets at their neighbors, yes, it could all be different. It could all be different tomorrow. And I'll tell you the story again. There is not a person living by the Gaza in the south of Israel who has not dreamed of the day that such a generation of Palestinians.
Yeah. I think that okay, a few things here on Syria there, because it is true. I mean, I think so. Okay, so John Brennan and Barack Obama, the head of the CIA, and of course the former president of the United States of America, had a policy of committing literal treason. Before they ended up accusing Donald Trump of treason, which was all bullshit. But they had a policy of committing literal treason by funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS in the Syrian civil war, poured billions of dollars and tons of weapons into that conflict. When Donald Trump, now it is true, by the way, that you are correct that like there certainly were military actions taken against ISIS after they invaded Iraq, which was not supposed to be part of the plan. There was also a lot of military actions taken by Vladimir Putin against ISIS after he came in on Assad's request, as you know. In 2017, when Donald Trump came in, one of the best things Donald Trump ever did, he cut off the CIA program to fund the anti-Assad rebels. And this was also a big part of what ended up like taking the energy out of ISIS. Also, I think there was a lot of good reporting that just they turned enough people on the ground against them. They were even just too radical and just people ended up hating them. It is true that they receded for quite a while, although the former emir of Al-Qaeda, al-Jilani, is now ruling Syria, which does not seem like a great deal or something that people in America should support. The true enemy of the American people, Al-Qaeda, now being in charge of Syria. I think that, it's easy to talk about how, like, if the Palestinians had done this different, then maybe things would have worked out different. But I just think, again, when you look at things, when you say, which essentially I think is your point here, right? Which, I mean, I tried to push you on this, but you're saying, look, we can degrade Hamas, but the cost of that is going to be slaughtering a whole bunch of people. Okay, I think you're, okay, they're not being slaughtered, they're being killed, okay, whatever
They're
word you want to use.
being killed in a brutal war started by Hamas, yes.
Yes, it's babies and little kids screaming out for help under rubble, and no help is coming. They sit there under the rubble until they die. That is the level of human suffering that's being inflicted. And if you want to say, well, listen, that's a price that I'm willing to pay to try to degrade Hamas, even though you yourself recognize that we can't totally eliminate them, but we could maybe degrade them or maybe take them down a peg, and the price for that is these babies being tortured to death, essentially, whatever you want to call it, okay. But from the other side of that story, like if there's, like I got little kids, I don't know if you have kids, I know you have kids, Joe. If anybody ever was saying to me that like my kids were the acceptable price for this policy that we want to put into place, I'm saying I don't think there's any scenario, Douglas, where there would be any time where you would accept Israeli kids dying like that as an acceptable price for a policy that you're going to be advocating for.
First of all, again, go back to what is actually happening. There is no desire or aim by the IAF or the IDF to go into Gaza and kill women and children.
Well, they're doing it, though.
Hang on. There is no desire for that. Does it happen collaterally? Certainly. And that is one of the very ugly rules of war and things that happen in war, and it's another of the reasons why almost like you shouldn't start a war and hide your rockets and your terrorists inside civilian buildings.
Yeah, but
hang on.
You've made this point a lot of times, but okay.
Well, it clearly can't be made enough because there is no intention on the Israeli side to cause the death of non-combat.
Oh, come on. I mean,
hang on.
Listen.
What?
Okay.
You think? Why do you think the Israelis would want to go and kill children in Gaza?
Listen, let me just, how about I say it like this, okay? And by the way, when I say it like this, I'm not claiming that disputes between nations are the same as handling dispute domestically. I'm just saying on the idea of intentionality or who wants to do this or whatever. Look, even if you had the right, let's say, somebody broke onto your property and killed some of your family members and you want to go kill this guy. If he goes back to his apartment building and you know that there's women and children in that apartment building, and so your move is to blow up the building, what you would be charged with is murder in the first degree. Cold-blooded, premeditated, intentional murder. And you could sit there and tell the judge, I didn't want to kill all those people. Why would I want to kill all of those people? I just had to kill that one guy. But that's bullshit. That's not what counts. You did it intentionally. You dropped a bomb knowing that there were women and children in that building. You're taking an action knowing that these innocent people are going to die. Then that is by definition intentional. And you could sit here and talk about, and it is true, there have been documented cases of Hamas placing missiles in mosques and in schools and things like that. But when you look at the aerial footage of Gaza, that does not describe every single strike that Israel has launched. There have been tons of bombs dropped where it's simply, and we have very good reporting on this, where they literally just have information that they believe with some degree of certainty that a couple of Hamas militants are in this building, and so they blow up the building. That is intentionally murdering innocent people. And if you're going to advocate for this war, I don't see how you can do it without saying that, at least bite the bullet that Madeleine Albright did when she was asked, we've played this clip on the show before, when she's point blank asked about the sanctions on Iraq, and are 500,000 children, is that price acceptable? And she said, yes, we believe that price is acceptable. You're saying if you're going to support this war, you know this is the price of it, so why can't you just say, yes, that price is acceptable? Because then we could have a real conversation about why the other side is going to look at you like a monster.
Because, first of all, I don't agree with any of the characterizations you made. Any of them.
Okay?
You say that the Israelis get some information as if it's like what, they're making it up, or you think the
No, I
Israelis
didn't say
want to drop a bomb, or no, they act on information about where the terrorists are, just like they act on information of where the hostages are. Secondly, when you talk about the destruction of Gaza, something you probably haven't realized, but is one of the reasons why the destruction looks so bad and is so bad is because when the IDF were clearing the areas that they'd asked the civilian population to leave and were going house to house, and it isn't just stories here or stories there. It's every second or third house in Gaza that has either munitions or tunnel entrances. Every second or third house is not the odd case. One of the things that everybody who has been there knows is you go into a mosque and you know there will be either rockets and or tunnel entrances. You go into a hospital and you know that there will be grenades or tunnel entrances or dungeons or whatever. Just on a light note, early in the conflict when the Shifa complex, which is used as Hamas headquarters, and has also been used as a hospital, but even in 2014, the BBC said this was when Hamas operated. When that was shown by the Israelis, they have massive weapons stored in the tunnels and cellars underneath it. They had grenades, RPGs, Kalashnikovs, the BBC's chief police correspondent was asked live on air, why would these things be in a hospital? And Jeremy Bowen said, well, it's perfectly possible there's a lot of, guns in the Middle East, perfectly possible security department of the hospital has a Kalashnikov. I said, yeah, and the grenades belong to cardiologists. Why? Why is this so normal that every civilian building and every second or third house in Gaza is a weapons dump or a place to go to tunnels? But the reason why the devastation, which it is in the north in particular, but also in Rafah and elsewhere, is what it is because every time the IDF went into an area where they had told the civilians to leave, the Hamas terrorists that remained were in civilian buildings and booby-trapped a very large number of the buildings. So what they did as they proceeded through those areas of Gaza to clear them was to set off munitions, which the American military and others use, which sets off secondary explosions in places of the region. And much of what you see in the photographs that you see, and many other things we've seen from Gaza, is the result of that. It is the result of the IDF trying to clear an area which has been very carefully and well booby-trapped for years. Let me make one other very quick point about the bigger picture, because I think it's important. We were talking about the Syrian, you mentioned the Syrian conflict crisis. I think, again, it's really important to keep this in mind, what I said earlier about let's not think we are the primary actors ever, or even that important. I remember the debate over the Syrian intervention issue, and at the time, despite being in many cases an interventionist, I said on that occasion that we didn't know what we were doing, clearly didn't know who we were going to back. If you remember, John McCain went to Syria to speak to some rebels, and one of them turned out to be a head-hacking jihadist.
Yep.
That wasn't great. And I said, I don't have any confidence that we know who to back. And despite many Syrian friends of mine imploring me otherwise, I said, I don't think it's something we can get. However, if you look at the last 10 years or more, 30 years of conflict in Syria, the US and the Western powers are not remotely significant. The significant actors in that conflict always have been the Russians, the Iranians. I mean, one of the things that blows my mind in the analysis of the region is the fact that the prime mover in the region, the Revolutionary Islamic government in Iran, has been oppressing the Iranians since 1979, and holding a great civilization in captivity. But the Iranian Revolutionary government of Tehran has literally been colonizing the region. I have this rule about, I took it from Vassal Grossman, the great Soviet Jewish writer. You had this great line about tell me what to accuse the Jews of, and I'll tell you what to do. This absolutely runs as well with the accusations against the Jewish state in the region. The Iranian Revolutionary government is constantly accusing Israelis of colonialism and expansion. It is the Iranian Revolutionary government that has been colonizing Iraq, colonizing Yemen, colonizing and destroying Lebanon, and colonizing Syria. And the amazing thing, when you look at the disaster that has happened in Syria in the last 30 years, and I don't see it getting especially better under the current jihadists, the disaster is not of our making. We are bit players. America is a
In
bit
Iraq?
player in Syria. We are a
Yeah,
bit
but you mentioned Iraq in there too.
I know. Well, with the great idiocy of that was that Iraq notices our failings, our lack of staying power, our desire to get out as soon as possible, and much more, which is all understandable, whether you agree with it or not. Hang on. And they moved in. Of course. But I was talking about Syria. In the Syrian theater, the main actors are not us. And one of the things I'm still interested in about this mindset is why does it always have to be us? It's other people who have actions in the world.
Again.
The Russians,
Okay,
the revolutionary
can I-
government in Iran, they are so busy.
I think
in
this
the
is
region.
this is all about framing here, because I don't think I've ever once made this claim. You've made this point several times so far, but I've never once made the claim that everything is always us. I think you're the one who's downplaying the influence and impact that we have. We are, after all, when I'm saying we, I'm saying the United States of America's federal government is the largest, most powerful organization in the history of the world. It is the world empire. And to sit there and say Iran colonized Iraq, no, George W. Bush invaded the country on a bunch of lies, a war that you supported. He went in there and overthrew Saddam Hussein and installed democracy in the Shiite majority country. Of course, he handed the thing over to Iran, but to say that that had no impact on Syria, or that the U.S. military funding and arming the anti-Assad rebels had no impact, I'm not claiming the entire thing is America. Bashar al-Assad was an actor. There were other forces there aside from the U.S. meddling there. But at the same time, you got the most powerful government in the history of the world, who, as we all know, put Syria on its 7 countries in 5 years list of who we're going to go overthrow. And it's had a profound impact on the region. Of course it did. It was a huge contributing factor to that civil war to begin with.
I think America is obviously a major actor. Certainly could be, is meant to be a major actor on the world stage. I think that the history of the region and many other regions around the world is that America does not have either the staying power, the capability, the intelligence, the kind of people that it would produce in order to have the kind of impact that you actually think it has. American weakness in the Middle East has been, and I say this as somebody obviously from Britain, but when Britain was a dominant world power, she produced the type of person who was keen to go and be a governor of a star somewhere and learn the local dialects and run the civil service.
You guys
and
were
the
better
army
at
much
empire
more.
than we are.
The
Yes.
point is that
Yes.
they produced that sort of person because they wanted to stay. America has never produced that sort of person, and it certainly hasn't in the Middle East in particular. It acts militarily on occasion, in my view, sometimes well, sometimes poorly. But the reason why America was so badly outplayed by the Mullahs in Iraq was simply that, as you say, after the war, America had nothing like the staying power of the Mullahs in Tehran, had nothing like the ability to affect post-war change like the Iranian revolutionary government did. And so, yes, if we create a vacuum like that, or somebody else creates a vacuum, and after all, we did not cause the beginning of this field, the West, let's say in this case, did not cause the beginning of the Arab Spring, as it was optimistically called at the beginning, or the beginning of the revolutionary uprising in Syria in 2011. These things were ground up, and the actors in the region moved in much independent policy. Okay. In the last 30 years of American foreign policy, there have been many major actors. Paul Wolfowitz is a relative. But we come slightly back full circle. In my view, I'm not saying you're guilty of this, certainly not knowing. In my view, when people start talking about Paul Wolfowitz, I always remember that line of Mark Stein's many years ago. He said, you can't help thinking that one of the reasons why people find Wolfowitz so appealing to talk about is that his name starts with a nasty animal and ends Jewish.
That is a funny thing to say.
People
I think
love saying Wolfowitz.
It's such a great name.
it is
For a new
right,
villain
right.
in a movie.
You can say, aha, he's perfect for it. Perfect for it.
And he
You
looked
say-
perfect
you'll
for
say-
it.
Right, you say, oh, the crafty Paul Wolfowitz.
His crazy
famous
eyebrows.
Hawk.
So you're a
And so
bigot. You're a Jew hater if you
That's-
mention the
no,
neocons?
No. Just let me continue with the thought. So I remember those days, and his boss, Donald Rumsfeld, was like the ruler of the world at that time. He had such charisma, such genius was attributed to him for the initial invasion of Iraq. Like people, you can't imagine the admiration that existed in the defense establishments around the world for Rumsfeld. Dick Cheney was so powerful that people of right and left, particularly on the left, spent all those years in the W. Bush administration saying W. wasn't the real president. He was being run by Dick Cheney because he was the brilliant, etc., etc.
You're certainly listening to him at the beginning.
Okay, but I'm just saying it goes back to this thing of when certain ideas catch hold and what's really going on. To attribute American foreign policy in the last 40 years, Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Pearl is knowingly or otherwise to encourage a conspiracy that has very obvious legs. And I just urge you not to do it.
Okay, let me respond to this a little bit. First of all, it is not at all saying that these guys therefore just control everything. I'm just pointing out what a 4-star general claimed, where plans originated and that they ended up being implemented. That doesn't mean that they were the absolute ruler or arbiter of what was going to happen. But again, I gotta say, for you to say that I can't bring up the neoconservatives
I never said you couldn't. I
Okay,
just
let
laughed.
me just right. But the implication is that I'm unwittingly giving fertile ground to some like Jew-hating conspiracy if I bring up a guy who's got a Jewish last name who was a consequential person in our government. This is like identical to the arguments of the woke left. That would just be like, oh, if you even say something, if you bring up the crime rate in Chicago, you're basically a bigot because other people could take this and run with it.
Come on.
No, you come on. What's the
Okay, look,
argument?
if you said to me,
I said a four-star general
Okay,
said something,
okay,
and
okay,
there's no.
okay,
What's the
okay.
response?
if you said to me, or somebody said to me, don't you think that some people are running the global financial system? And I said, possibly. And I know, who do you think it is? And they said, the Rothschilds. I think I'd be right in saying there was something a bit off about the character of the person doing that, because it seemed like they were playing some kind of lazy old folk. And I think similarly that if you give the implication that a cabal of people, particularly, and you should be really careful about this because of the people who will come up underneath you, if you give the implication that these cabals exist and you decide to elevate the Jews or people with Jewish names in it and then play down the non-Jews, I can tell you, you will be opening up a world of madness.
But
beyond
am I
the one
really
even
playing
that
down the
we're in.
non-Jews? I mean, go look at the stuff that I've said about Obama, about George W. Bush.
You said Middle East policy
I-
is Dick Poe and Paul Wolfowitz. I said,
I
how
brought
about
no.
it's not?
I mean, this is why I'm saying this is a woke leftist tactic. I literally just mentioned that a four-star general said this. I'm quoting him, and now you're telling me that this is
Look,
the same
don't
thing as
pretend to me
promoting.
that when you quote somebody, it's a totally arbitrary thing. Fuck out of here. You decided
I'm
to
not
pluck
arguing.
that out.
I'm not arguing that it's arbitrary. I'm saying I'm using the quote for a reason. I was connecting it
Yes.
to an argument.
And I'm saying to you,
I'm
that I
giving
think
fertile
that
ground to
you're-
Jew haters to mention.
I think that when you decide to elevate what is a conspiracy of people who are overthrowing the governments of various countries, some of which haven't been overthrown and others of which have, by the way, were not overthrown by American dominance, certainly not in Syria. And then you say that the people who are doing it are these people with Jewish names. I think you should be more judicious than that, because you probably know what bubbles up underneath you.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no question that there are, no matter what, and by the way, it's funny just hearing you say this to me. I mean, look, and by the way, I completely agree with you. I think you've been one of the best champions on opposing Europe's insane immigration policy. I also think the United States of America's had an insane immigration policy. I'm happy to see that
Point of
that
agreement.
seems to be being reversed. But imagine you made a point about immigration, and I were to say to you, be careful what's bubbling up online, because now you're getting. Look, the fact is, if you are taking a position that opposes, say, Muslim immigration into the UK, then yes, it is quite possible that a lot of people who really just hate Muslims are going to end up liking what you had to say or following you. But that doesn't mean you're responsible to it. And if I were to say that to you, you would be the first to very eloquently point out that that is a complete non-argument. The question is this policy good or is it bad? And whether there's not, and if you want to say to me, hey, I should disclaim when I make this point that hey, I'm Jewish, I love Jewish people. The fact that there were some Jewish people involved in our foreign policy establishment does not mean that it's the Jews. Then fine, I'm happy to say that. But I just think it's a non-argument to say that you're kind of you're creating fertile ground for this hatred. If I'm being completely honest, I think we've seen what you're talking about bubbling up on Twitter. Do you think that's gotten worse over the last 18 months?
Yeah.
Right. I think kind of what Israel's doing in this war and the U.S. funding and arming it have been something that is really a great facilitator for that stuff to bubble up.
As I said, we could go back to that. I disagree. I think that Israel has every right to go in and destroy the terrorist group that carried out mass.
Yes, but again, but
anyhow,
no one's arguing that they have the right to destroy the terrorists. The question is they have the right to kill innocent
go
people.
around again, which I think we've done.
We're just
But
not answering what I'm saying.
I think I've already answered that. But just to go back to the meat of that, I think you don't realise that actually people like me who have a voice and write and much more do think about that all the time. It's a profound concern and responsibility.
No, I agree with that.
Right. And don't think I don't worry all the time and make sure I intervene into a debate very carefully at times when I think some people have picked up something that I've been saying and are going to go wrong with it. That scares the hell out of me, and I do it regularly.
Yeah,
And I do
me
it
too, by the
because
way.
I have to.
Yeah, listen. So
And-
okay, so that's a
and
point of
so-
agreement too.
so
but you
I-
don't stop believing in that policy
No,
for it, and you won't
no,
stop
but
bringing
you
that up.
do say that you do say on occasion. I mean, the most obvious one on that. If there is something where something really fetid happens, something really terrible, and there's a bunch of people that decide to riot or commit violence or stuff like that, I know that I have to, as a duty, say, absolutely, this is the thing. If it is people trying to pretend that all Muslims this or all that, absolutely, I intervene to stop that. I think that this is one of the responsibilities that comes with putting out ideas in the public square.
Yeah.
And I think that none of us are blame-free, but all of us have some kind of responsibility to know that what we put out there is very carefully watched, very carefully followed, and that we have to tread well.
Well, okay, so I agree with that, but when you say you intervene, what exactly do you mean by that? You mean you voice opposition to it. You say, hey, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, we have to have a sane immigration policy that's good for our
or
country.
make sure I say which politician I think can deal with it decently, which one will not. I mean, I've made plenty of enemies of European right by saying I think it's bad. Well,
Yeah.
I just put it out there. I literally say it as a point of caution.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't disagree with that, and I've certainly done the same thing. Said that, like, I don't know, like, I don't like Jew hatred on Twitter, and I don't like people jumping to wild conspiracies that they don't have nearly enough evidence to, actually back up, which I've seen quite a bit of. That being said, I also think there's a whole lot of real conspiracies, and I'm not going to stop talking about those just because some people on Twitter might take it in a bad direction.
As the great Michael Malice said, quoted, one red pill, not the whole bottle.
I've been trying to limit people to one red pill. One red pill a year. That's all
Problem
you
is, there's
need.
a lot of people, they take one of those things and they just get hungry.
Sort of like boosters.
Well, it ends up, yeah, exactly. You take none of those. No, you're supposed to take one red pill.
By the
You're
way,
not
what's
supposed to
the
take any
one?
of those.
What's the one in front of you?
Which one?
That one there.
This?
That one. Yeah.
Nicotine?
Oh, that's the chewing one.
It's like a pouch.
Chris Williamson showed me yesterday this one that you said weightlifters are using now. It's like a powder.
A nicotine powder?
No, it's not nicotine. It's something like it.
Creatine?
No, it's like it's to sniff.
Oh, no. That's smelling salts. We do
Smelling
that
salt. That's right.
for a
Smelling
goof,
salt.
for silly. We do that to be silly.
I hadn't heard of that since
They're
like
horrible.
19th century women who thought they had the vapors and said these are smelling salts.
Well, they used to use it for boxers when they got knocked out
Is that
to wake
that,
them up.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. Does it work?
It's, it works for weightlifters. You sniff it before you lift incredible amounts of weight. Allegedly, powerlifters use them. That's literally why they sell it. It just jolts your entire central